Elon Musk sat quietly in the corner booth of a small McDonald's, trying to blend in with the mundane lunch crowd. It wasn't often that he found himself in places like this, surrounded by families, teenagers, and people rushing in for a quick bite. As one of the world's most well-known entrepreneurs, the last thing he needed was attention. The world already watched his every move, tracking his tweets and business ventures. Today, though, he was here for one reason only: to be just a regular guy. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? His eyes scanned the menu, but he wasn't really hungry. His mind was miles away, occupied by a mountain of tasks: SpaceX's next rocket launch, the future of Tesla, and his ongoing quest to make life multiplanetary. It was easy to forget sometimes that life wasn't just about missions to Mars or electric cars. It was about moments like this, moments where he could escape the pressure, even if only for a short while. The soft hum of the McDonald's, the clinking of trays, the laughter of children. It all felt comforting, almost nostalgic. Elon had always been drawn to simplicity. Yet, he knew this rare moment of peace wouldn't last long. Something always seemed to happen when he least expected it, something that would remind him of his place in the larger picture. Today, however, was supposed to be different. Just as he was about to take a sip of his coffee, a small voice broke through the background noise of the restaurant. "I know you're running out of time." Elon froze, his hand hovering just above the cup. He had heard the words clearly, as though someone had whispered directly into his ear. But when he turned, all he saw was a young girl sitting at the booth next to his. A little girl, no more than 5 years old. She was looking at him with wide, innocent eyes, her blonde hair tied in a messy ponytail, and a red sweater that seemed too big for her tiny frame. At first, Elon thought it might have been some kind of mistake, a child talking to someone else, or perhaps a random, nonsensical comment from a bored kid. But no, there was something in her gaze that made him pause. Something unsettling. He cleared his throat, trying to shake off the strange feeling creeping up his spine. "Excuse me, little one. What did you say?" The girl didn't smile or giggle like children often do. Instead, she just repeated, "I know you're running out of time." Elon was now more intrigued than alarmed, but a shiver still ran down his back. He looked around the restaurant, as if seeking some explanation. Surely, this was a joke, right? But the child's expression was serious. Too serious. He leaned closer, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "What do you mean?" he asked softly. The girl didn't answer right away. She simply stared at him, her eyes narrowing slightly as though sizing him up. Then, without a hint of hesitation, she added, "You've been waiting for something to happen. It's almost time." Elon could feel his heart skip a beat. This wasn't just a random conversation. It felt significant. A strange chill spread across his chest, and his mind raced. Was she talking about the upcoming SpaceX mission? Some secret project he hadn't shared with anyone? Or was it something more personal? Maybe a warning? He wasn't sure what to think. After all, he was a man used to dealing with complex equations, technological problems, and space missions. But nothing in his vast experience had prepared him for this moment. A little girl, sitting in a McDonald's, whispering cryptic warnings. The room around him felt quieter now, more surreal. The noise of the restaurant seemed to fade into the background as his attention zeroed in on her. He glanced at the parents nearby, but they were oblivious to the interaction, lost in their own worlds, chatting over fries and milkshakes. It was as if no one else could hear what had just been said. "Are you okay?" he asked, now concerned. The girl blinked and looked away, her focus shifting toward the window. He sat back, unsure of how to proceed. His initial instinct was to brush it off. After all, she was just a child, and children say all sorts of things. But the words hung in the air, like a shadow, something that couldn't be ignored. It was a gut feeling, a sense that this moment was more than coincidence. There was something about it that felt important. Suddenly, the young girl got up, taking her meal tray and walking away, seemingly unaffected by the strange exchange. Elon watched her disappear through the restaurant door, his mind reeling with confusion. His pulse quickened, and he felt a nagging sensation, like a voice inside him urging him to understand. What did she mean by running out of time? He sat in silence for a moment, staring at the empty space where the little girl had been. His coffee had gone cold, but he hadn't even noticed. A part of him wanted to dismiss it. After all, it was just a child, right? But another part of him couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening, something that he wasn't prepared for. With a sigh, Elon pulled out his phone. It was time to check in with his team. SpaceX had a mission scheduled in a few months, and there was no time to lose. Still, the weight of that strange encounter lingered. His fingers hovered over the screen, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the girl's words. "You've been waiting for something to happen. It's almost time." Could she have been talking about the mission? Or something even bigger? For the first time in years, Elon wasn't sure what would come next. But one thing was certain. Whatever was coming, it was closer than he realized. Ever had a moment where something completely unexpected shook you to your core? Let us know in the comments. What's the weirdest thing someone's ever said to you? As Elon Musk sat in the McDonald's, his mind wandered far beyond the bizarre encounter with the little girl. It wasn't the first time he had felt a sense of foreboding in his life, but this time, it felt different. Much different. Yet, for some reason, it reminded him of a moment from his past. A time when he was just another young boy trying to understand his place in the world. Elon had grown up in Pretoria, South Africa, in a family that was anything but conventional. His father, Errol, was a tough, complicated man. A talented electromechanical engineer, Errol had big dreams for his children, but those dreams came with an iron fist. Elon's relationship with him was strained, often filled with harsh criticism and emotional distance. It was his mother, May, who had shaped much of his early worldview. A model and dietitian, she was the one who encouraged Elon's love for books, science, and technology. From a young age, Elon had been captivated by the idea of building things. Whether it was programming video games or creating his own inventions, he always had a deep fascination with how things worked. His early childhood was a mix of fascination and frustration. He was an outsider at school, often the target of bullying because of his awkward, bookish demeanor. But that isolation didn't stop him. It fueled his obsession with understanding the world around him. By the time he moved to Canada at the age of 17, Elon was already thinking big. He had a vision, one that reached far beyond the confines of Earth. The idea of making life multiplanetary had begun to take root. From there, he moved to the United States to attend the University of Pennsylvania, where his appetite for knowledge and innovation grew even stronger. Little did he know that this hunger for knowledge would soon lead him to create companies like Zip2, PayPal, Tesla, and SpaceX, companies that would revolutionize multiple industries and change the world. But for all his accomplishments, there was always something gnawing at him, something that made him feel like he was chasing a destiny that he couldn't fully comprehend. It was a relentless drive to do something extraordinary, to make an impact, to push humanity forward, even if it meant facing insurmountable odds. And that, he thought as he took another sip of his cold coffee, was the very same drive that had propelled him to this point in life. A point where he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. He wasn't just a tech entrepreneur anymore. He was a symbol, a figurehead for a future many people didn't yet fully understand. And with that status came immense pressure. Elon had always been a man of extremes. His successes were often seen as genius, his failures as stubbornness. His work with Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink was revolutionary, but it came at a cost. Sleepless nights, strained relationships, and a constant battle between his personal life and professional ambitions. Despite the billions in the bank, the accolades, and the admiration from fans, there were moments when he felt more alone than ever before. Sometimes, the weight of it all felt suffocating. When he was younger, he had dreamed of a future where humanity could reach the stars, where space travel wasn't a fantasy, but a way of life. That dream hadn't faded over the years. In fact, it had only grown stronger. He felt like he was on the verge of something monumental, something that would change everything. But it wasn't just about rockets or electric cars. There was a deeper connection, a sense that there was more to this journey than just technological advancement. Elon had always believed that the future was in his hands, and in the hands of those who dared to dream with him. Yet today, In that simple McDonald's booth, he wasn't thinking about rockets or cars or anything that normally consumed him. No, today he was consumed by something far stranger. The words of a little girl echoed in his mind. You've been waiting for something to happen. It's almost time. Elon couldn't shake the feeling that the mysterious whisper wasn't just some random child's comment. It felt like a warning, a message he was supposed to understand. But from where? From who? He had been waiting for something. He'd always been waiting for the next great leap, the next great innovation, the next challenge that would push humanity to the next level. But was it possible that something beyond his control, beyond his understanding, was now approaching? In that moment, Elon Musk found himself questioning everything. He had built his life on the belief that he could solve the world's most impossible problems, whether it was creating reusable rockets or developing AI that could change the course of human history. But this was different. This wasn't about science or technology. This felt like a personal challenge, a puzzle that didn't fit within any equation he knew. It wasn't like he didn't believe in the unknown. After all, he was a man who had built an empire around the idea that humanity could leave Earth and survive on Mars. He believed in the vastness of the universe and the mysteries it held. But could he, Elon Musk, who had his eyes set on the stars, truly understand what the girl had meant? Could the message she whispered somehow be a part of his future, his destiny? As the restaurant continued to hum around him, Elon's mind raced. He knew he couldn't ignore this. He had never been one to ignore a challenge. This was no different. With that thought, his phone buzzed on the table. A reminder from his assistant about the upcoming SpaceX mission, the one that was supposed to take place in a few months. His next big step in making life multiplanetary. Yet, as he looked at the screen, the words of the little girl hit him again. It's almost time. Could it be that the future was already unfolding in ways he couldn't predict? Could the countdown to something bigger than himself have already begun? His thoughts were interrupted by another notification. A news update about a new development in artificial intelligence, something that would revolutionize the tech industry. But as he read the headline, Elon's thoughts once again returned to the girl, to her cryptic message. What was this all leading to? What was almost happening? Elon wasn't sure yet. But one thing was certain. He couldn't ignore it any longer. Elon Musk couldn't shake the strange encounter at McDonald's. The girl's cryptic words kept echoing in his mind, almost as if they were carved into his thoughts. You've been waiting for something to happen. It's almost time. He had tried to rationalize it, but the more he thought about it, the less it made sense. It wasn't just the oddity of her statement, it was the weight behind it. There was a certainty in her voice, an unsettling calmness that seemed out of place for someone so young. As he sat in his office the next day, attempting to push the bizarre encounter out of his mind, his phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. The usual schedule reminders and business calls lined up, but something about the quiet hum of the office made the day feel particularly off. His eyes drifted to the screen, but the thoughts of the little girl kept resurfacing. He couldn't ignore it. He had to know more. Elon tried to brush it off and focus on work. After all, he had 1,000 things on his plate, from managing SpaceX's next launch to finalizing the Tesla roadmap. But that girl, Lily, kept appearing in his thoughts. There was something about her that made him uneasy. Who was she? How could she know something that seemed so important? Was it a coincidence? Or had fate just thrown him into something beyond his control? In an attempt to make sense of it, Elon called his private investigator, a trusted man named Greg, who had helped him with a variety of matters in the past. He explained the encounter briefly, though he didn't fully know what to expect from it. Greg listened intently, sensing the seriousness in Elon's voice. "I'll look into it, Mr. Musk," Greg said, his voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "I'll start by tracking down the McDonald's location and see if there's anything unusual about the girl or her family." Elon's fingers hovered over the phone. He didn't know if he was making a mistake by pursuing this, but deep down, he felt an undeniable pull. It wasn't like him to sit idly by when something didn't make sense. "I appreciate it," Elon replied. "Let me know if you find anything." It wasn't long before Greg got back to him with a lead. The girl, it turned out, was known around the local area. Her name was Lily, and she had been spotted at the McDonald's a few times before, often alone or with someone who didn't seem to be her parent. The oddest part? No one could remember exactly where she came from or who her family was. A few locals had spoken to her, but no one knew much about her background. This only deepened Elon's sense of unease. It wasn't just her cryptic words anymore. There was a mystery surrounding this girl that didn't add up. If Lily had been appearing in that McDonald's without anyone knowing where she came from, then where had she been all along? And why had she singled him out with her message? Greg continued his search, piecing together odd details about the girl's past. He found that Lily had, at some point, been involved in an experimental program designed to study children's cognitive abilities, specifically their capacity to predict future events. The program was supposed to be top secret, but somehow, the information had leaked. No one knew the full extent of it, but Greg had uncovered enough to know that there was something very unusual about this child. Elon sat back, his mind spinning. It sounded almost too strange to be true, but the more he learned, the more everything seemed to fit. He wasn't sure what to believe. Was Lily a victim of some bizarre scientific experiment? Or was there something more to her that he wasn't yet seeing? The thought of a child being part of a covert experiment made him uneasy. The ethical implications were enormous, but even more troubling was the possibility that the program had somehow gone wrong, leading to a child with abilities beyond anything anyone could predict. A few days later, Greg called with an update that sent a chill through Elon's spine. "Mr. Musk, I've found something that might explain the girl's behavior," Greg said, his voice unusually grave. "It's about the experiment. One of the researchers involved in the project reached out to me. They say Lily is special, that she's not like the others. She doesn't just predict events. She can see them, project them, even. And there's more. Apparently, she's been seeing your future." Elon's heart skipped a beat. His mind reeled, trying to comprehend what Greg had just said. "Is that even possible?" Elon asked, his voice low, filled with disbelief. "I don't know," Greg admitted, "but I think it's something worth looking into. She might have been trained to recognize patterns in the world, and her abilities could be far more advanced than anything we've seen. If she's part of this program, there's a good chance her predictions are more than just random guesses." Elon felt the weight of the situation settle over him. This wasn't just about a strange encounter in a McDonald's anymore. If Lily was involved in something like this, it meant that there were forces at play far beyond his control. He couldn't just ignore it. Not after what had been said. "I want to meet her," Elon said, his tone firm. Greg hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'll arrange it. But be careful, Mr. Musk. There's something off about this whole situation." Elon didn't need to be told twice. The pieces were coming together, and despite the confusion, the tension, and the uncertainty, he knew one thing. Lily wasn't just some random child. There was something about her, something that made him believe she was the key to understanding what was happening in his life, and that something was about to change everything. The day Elon had been anticipating for days finally arrived. He had never been one to shy away from the unknown, but this felt different. The more he delved into Lily's past, the more unsettling the details became. Her involvement in the secretive program, her mysterious abilities. It was all too much to ignore. Elon had faced numerous challenges in his life, from failed ventures to personal struggles, but nothing had ever felt so inexplicable. And he was certain that meeting Lily was the only way to gain clarity. Elon arrived at a small, inconspicuous building on the outskirts of Los Angeles, where Greg had arranged the meeting. The place was a former research facility that had been repurposed for more private projects over the years. It wasn't flashy or state-of-the-art, more of an unassuming location, perfect for conducting secretive operations without attracting too much attention. Greg had given him a brief rundown of what to expect. He warned him that Lily was not like any child he had ever met. She wasn't a typical 5-year-old, despite her appearance. Her cognitive abilities, according to Greg's findings, were off the charts. She had the mental capacity of someone far older than her age. But what troubled Elon the most was the mention that Lily could predict or see events that hadn't happened yet. Elon's mind buzzed with questions as he stepped out of his car. He had no idea what he was walking into, but his curiosity outweighed the unease settling in his chest. He walked up to the entrance and rang the doorbell. A few moments later, the door creaked open, and Greg stood there, his expression grim but resolute. Mr. Musk, Greg said quietly, gesturing for him to come inside. She's ready to meet you. Elon followed Greg down a narrow hallway, which led into a stark, minimalistic room. In the center sat a small table with 2 chairs, one of which was occupied by a young girl. Lily. She looked exactly as he remembered. Small, blonde hair, a red sweater that was slightly too big for her, and an expression that was far too mature for someone her age. She didn't smile when she saw him, nor did she show any sign of excitement. Instead, she simply studied him, her wide, observant eyes never leaving his face. Elon took a seat across from her, still unsure of what to say. He wasn't the type to feel nervous, but this situation was different. There was an air of mystery around Lily, something that made him question everything he knew about the world. "Hello, Lily," he began softly, trying to gauge her reaction. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about waiting for something to happen. You said it was almost time." Lily blinked, her gaze steady. She didn't answer immediately, and for a moment, the silence hung heavily in the air. Then, in a voice that sounded far too wise for her years, she spoke. "You're running out of time, Mr. Musk," she said, her tone even, as though she were discussing the weather. "The future you're waiting for is already here, but you don't see it." Elon felt a chill run down his spine. He was used to being ahead of the curve, to seeing what others couldn't. But Lily's words, there was something about them that didn't sit right. She wasn't just talking about a scientific breakthrough or the next big project. She was speaking as though she knew something deeper, something more profound. "Why me?" Elon asked, leaning in slightly. "How do you know this? How do you know what I'm waiting for?" Lily tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "I see things. I see what happens next. I see what will happen to you. To everyone." Elon's heart raced. Could she really be seeing the future? Or was this all part of some elaborate game? He wasn't sure, but he had to know more. "What do you see for me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily's eyes narrowed. Her lips parted as though to speak, but then she hesitated. Her expression shifted, and for the first time, she looked uncertain. The calm confidence she had shown earlier was gone, replaced by something else, a flicker of doubt, or perhaps fear. It was hard to tell, but it was there. "I can't tell you everything," she said quietly, almost to herself, "but there's something coming. It's not what you think. It's bigger than rockets and cars. It's bigger than anything you've ever done." Elon's mind raced, trying to process her words. He had spent years pushing the boundaries of technology, engineering, and space exploration. But now, this little girl was suggesting that none of that mattered in the grand scheme of things, that something even more monumental was on the horizon. "What is it?" Elon asked, his voice tight with urgency. "What's coming?" Lily remained silent for a moment, her gaze drifting toward the window as if looking at something far away. When she finally spoke again, her voice was softer, almost sorrowful. "You'll know soon enough, but you won't be ready." Elon's stomach tightened. He had spent his entire life preparing for the future, for the unknown, for challenges that no one had dared to face before. And yet, here was a child, telling him that he wasn't ready. Before he could respond, Lily stood up suddenly and walked toward the door, pausing briefly to glance back at him. "You won't have much time to figure it out," she said cryptically. "The countdown has already begun." With that, she left the room, leaving Elon alone with his thoughts. The words she had spoken lingered in his mind, gnawing at him. What was coming? And why hadn't he seen it? Greg, who had been waiting outside, entered the room as the door clicked shut behind Lily. He looked at Elon, his expression unreadable. "What did you think?" Greg asked quietly. Elon didn't immediately respond. His mind was still processing the conversation, the weight of Lily's words. He had encountered many extraordinary people in his life. Geniuses, scientists, inventors, but none of them had ever made him feel so small, so unprepared. "I think I need to know more," Elon said finally, his voice firm. Greg nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll get to work. There's more to Lily's story, more we don't know, but I'll dig deeper. You're not alone in this." As Elon left the facility, A sense of foreboding settled over him. The future he had been chasing was no longer a distant concept. It was already here, and it was coming faster than he could ever imagine, and he was running out of time. Days passed in a blur of meetings, calls, and strategy sessions. Elon tried to push the conversation with Lily to the back of his mind, focusing on the endless tasks he had at hand. There was always something that demanded his attention, whether it was a SpaceX launch or Tesla's next big milestone. His life was a constant whirlwind of innovation and deadlines. Yet, no matter how hard he tried to focus on his work, he couldn't shake the lingering unease that followed that strange encounter. Lily's words haunted him, and they seemed to echo louder with each passing day. "You won't be ready." The words echoed through his mind like a drumbeat, a constant reminder that there was something out there he wasn't prepared for, something that was already in motion. Elon had always prided himself on his ability to anticipate the future. Whether it was the development of electric cars or the advent of reusable rockets, he was a man known for being several steps ahead of everyone else. But this was different. Lily's cryptic message suggested something far beyond anything he could control or predict. It felt like a storm was brewing on the horizon, and he wasn't sure how to prepare for it. The days seemed to stretch on, and with each passing hour, Elon found himself more and more consumed by the thought of Lily and her mysterious powers. What was it she had seen? What did she mean by the countdown? His mind was a jumble of questions, but there were no answers. One evening, as Elon sat in his office, staring out the window at the sprawling city below, his phone buzzed with an incoming message from Greg. It was a brief update, but it was enough to send a chill through his veins. "We've uncovered something significant." The program Lily was part of wasn't just an experiment. It was part of a much larger, global initiative. There's a connection to a group that has been monitoring the future. And it's not just about technology, it's about something far more dangerous. "We need to talk." Elon immediately felt a sense of urgency. This wasn't just about a child with strange abilities anymore. It was about something much bigger, something that had been lurking in the background for far longer than he had realized. He dialed Greg's number, his mind racing. "Greg, what is this all about?" Elon demanded as soon as Greg picked up. "What do you mean by a global initiative? And what's the connection to this group?" Greg's voice was calm, but there was a tension beneath it. "It's complicated. The program Lily was part of was just the tip of the iceberg. There's a secret group, one that has been gathering information about future events for decades. They've been monitoring people like Lily, children who exhibit unique abilities to predict the future. They believe the key to controlling the future lies in understanding these patterns. And now, it seems, they've set their sights on you." Elon felt his heart skip a beat. "They're watching me?" "Not just watching you," Greg replied. "They've been manipulating events around you for years. They've guided you in ways you don't even realize. Your success, your inventions, it wasn't all your own doing. You've been part of their plan. And now, they're ready for the next phase." Elon's mind was spinning. He had always thought that he was in control of his destiny, that his vision and his drive had led him to where he was today. But now, Greg was suggesting that everything he had done, everything he had accomplished, was part of someone else's design. "What's their plan?" Elon asked, his voice low with suspicion. "We don't know yet," Greg admitted, "but I've been able to track some of their movements. They've been setting things in motion for a long time, and it's all pointing toward you." Elon sat back in his chair, trying to process the information. He had always believed that the future was in his hands, that he could change the world with his inventions and his ideas. But now, it seemed that someone or something else had been pulling the strings all along. "I need to meet with Lily again," Elon said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "I need answers." Greg hesitated before responding. "Be careful, Mr. Musk. This isn't just about Lily anymore. This is much bigger than we thought. These people, this group, they have their eyes on you, and they'll stop at nothing to see their plan unfold." Elon's mind raced. This was no longer just about technology, innovation, or even the future of humanity. This was about a larger game, a game in which he had unknowingly become a pawn. And now, it seemed, the countdown to something monumental had begun. Later that week, Elon arranged another meeting with Lily. He wasn't sure what he hoped to gain from it. He wasn't even sure what he believed anymore. But the uncertainty gnawed at him, pushing him toward answers. He needed to understand the larger picture, to understand what Lily had meant when she said, "The countdown has already begun." As he sat in the same room where he had met Lily before, his mind was clouded with questions. He had never felt so uncertain in his life, not even when he was trying to get SpaceX off the ground. But this was different. This was no longer about building rockets or electric cars. This was about survival, about understanding a force far beyond his comprehension. Lily entered the room quietly, her small figure looking as unassuming as before. She didn't smile or greet him. Instead, she simply sat down across from him, her eyes steady, unblinking. "You're here because you want answers," she said, as though reading his mind. "But you won't like what you find." Elon took a deep breath, steeling himself. "I need to know what's happening. What is the countdown? What's coming?" Lily looked at him for a long moment, her expression inscrutable. "The future you've been building toward, it's already set in motion. You think you're in control, but you're not. You're part of a much larger plan, a plan that was set in motion long before you even knew it." Elon's heart raced. What plan? Who's behind it? Lily's gaze never wavered. "You already know the answer, Mr. Musk. The question is, do you have the courage to face it?" Elon felt a chill settle over him as the weight of her words sank in. The future he had worked so hard to shape, was it truly his? Or had it been preordained long before he had even taken his first step toward it? The countdown was no longer just a warning. It was a reality, and Elon had no idea what the next phase would bring. Elon's world, once built on certainty and calculated risks, was now crumbling around him. Lily's cryptic words echoed in his mind, their weight settling on his chest like an invisible burden. "You're part of a much larger plan." Those words were like an insistent drumbeat, growing louder with every passing minute. For days, Elon had searched for a way to make sense of it all. The information Greg had uncovered, the secret group manipulating future events, Lily's unsettling insights, nothing made sense. If everything he had achieved, every innovation and leap forward, was part of someone else's design, then who was pulling the strings? And why him? There was only one place left to turn. He needed to speak to someone who might have answers. Someone who could offer perspective in the face of a mystery that stretched far beyond his understanding. Elon called a private meeting with one of his most trusted advisors, Dr. Amelia Johnson. She was an expert in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and the intersections of technology and ethics. She had been with him from the early days of Tesla and SpaceX, and her sharp intellect had helped guide him through many of his ventures. If anyone could help him understand what was happening, it was her. Dr. Johnson arrived at his office late one evening, her brow furrowed as she entered the room. Elon had called her urgently, and he could tell she was already concerned by the serious tone in his voice. "Elon, what's going on?" she asked, settling into a chair across from him. "You've been distant for the past few days. What is it?" Elon didn't waste time with pleasantries. He dove straight into the events that had unfolded, his encounter with Lily, the mysterious program she had been part of, and the unsettling connection to the global group that had been manipulating his life. He told Dr. Johnson everything he had learned, from the cryptic messages to Greg's research into the group's activities. As he spoke, he could see the skepticism on her face. But as he described Lily's abilities, her predictions, and the idea of a larger plan unfolding, her expression shifted from disbelief to something closer to concern. "This is a lot to process, Elon," she said, her voice low. "I've read some speculative theories about predictive programs, and there are a few isolated cases of people with extraordinary abilities, but nothing like what you're describing. If this is true, if there really is a global initiative monitoring the future, then we're talking about something far beyond any technological or scientific discovery we've ever encountered." Elon felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had hoped Dr. Johnson would provide clarity, but instead, her words only deepened the mystery. "So you think it's possible?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "That there's a group out there influencing events? That I've been part of their plan without even knowing it?" Dr. Johnson's eyes narrowed as she considered the question. I don't know, Elon. But what I do know is that you've always been ahead of the curve. You've always been driven by a vision that no one else could see. That's why your work has been so revolutionary. But if there's a group that has been guiding you, it means they've been watching, studying patterns. And the fact that they've turned their attention to you suggests something significant is about to happen. Elon's mind raced. It wasn't just about him anymore. The very fabric of everything he had worked toward, everything humanity had worked toward, was now being questioned. Was this future really his? Or had someone else already mapped it out? I need to see Lily again, Elon said suddenly, his resolve hardening. I need to hear more from her. There's something she knows, something that I don't. Dr. Johnson hesitated, then nodded slowly. Be careful, Elon. You're treading into dangerous territory. The more you learn about this group, the more you might regret it. You might uncover things that you can't unlearn. Elon didn't flinch. I have to know. If this is a game, then I'm ready to play. But I need to understand the rules. Dr. Johnson gave him a pointed look, her concern clear. You might not like the game they're playing. The next day, Elon arranged another meeting with Lily. This time, he was more prepared for the weight of the situation. He couldn't afford to let the uncertainty cloud his judgment. The stakes were too high. As he arrived at the same facility where he had met Lily before, his thoughts swirled. The once stark room now felt suffocating, the walls closing in on him as he tried to wrap his mind around everything that had happened. The truth, whatever it was, felt just out of reach. Lily was waiting for him again, sitting at the same small table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked no different from the first time he had met her. Her blonde hair fell gently over her shoulders, and her eyes, those wide, knowing eyes, met his with an almost unnerving clarity. You came back, she said softly, as though the fact that he had returned wasn't surprising at all. I knew you would. Elon didn't waste time. Tell me everything, Lily. What's the plan? Who are these people who've been controlling my life? And what does this countdown mean? Lily tilted her head, considering him carefully. It's not about control, Mr. Musk, she said, her voice quiet but firm. It's about destiny. They've been guiding you because you're part of something much bigger. You're connected to the future in a way you don't fully understand. Elon's pulse quickened. I don't want to be part of some predetermined destiny. I want to make my own choices. I want to shape the future. Lily's gaze softened, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. That's the hardest part. You think you're in control, but in the end, all of your choices are already written. Elon stood up, unable to sit any longer. The room felt like it was closing in around him. You're saying everything I've done, everything I've built, isn't mine? That it was all part of some plan? Lily stood too, her small frame emanating an aura of calm. It was never just about you, Mr. Musk. You were always meant to be a part of something much bigger. The countdown isn't about time running out. It's about time running towards something. You can't change what's already coming, but you can choose how to face it. Elon's heart pounded in his chest. So what happens now? Lily stepped closer to him, her gaze unwavering. Now, you prepare. You prepare for what's next. The future is already in motion. The question is, how will you move with it? Elon stood in the silence of the room, his mind racing. The countdown wasn't about avoiding what was coming. It was about accepting it. The future, as he knew it, was already set in motion, and he was just one piece of the puzzle. But he wasn't going to give up. Not yet. He still had the power to choose. And whatever this plan was, he wasn't going to let it dictate his fate. The days following his meeting with Lily left Elon in a state of restless confusion. Her words, though cryptic, had shifted something in him. He had always prided himself on his ability to control his destiny, on his ability to challenge the limits of possibility. But now, it felt as though that control had been an illusion all along. There was a greater force at work, one that had been pulling the strings long before he had ever thought to step into the spotlight. The idea of a larger plan lingered in his thoughts. Lily had told him that he was part of something bigger, something he couldn't fully comprehend. She had also hinted at a choice, how he would face the future. But what did that really mean? How could he prepare for a future that had already been set in motion, one in which his actions, no matter how bold, might not matter. Elon turned to the only people he could trust, those who had been with him through thick and thin. He called a secretive meeting with a few of his closest advisors, including Dr. Amelia Johnson, the brilliant AI expert he had consulted previously. If anyone could help him find some sort of clarity, it was her. The group gathered in his private conference room late one evening. The lights dimmed, their faces illuminated by the glow of the monitors in front of them. Elon explained everything. Lily, the strange program, the global group that seemed to be tracking his every move, and the unnerving countdown that was now ticking in his mind. He felt vulnerable laying it all out on the table, but he needed answers. He needed to understand what was happening and how to stop it. Dr. Johnson, as always, remained calm and analytical. "What you're describing, Elon, is unprecedented," she said slowly. "If there is indeed a group manipulating the future, tracking individuals with predictive abilities like Lily, they're operating on a level far beyond anything I've encountered. This isn't just about technology anymore. This is about controlling the very fabric of reality." The words hit him like a blow to the chest. Controlling the very fabric of reality. The implications were staggering. If such a group existed, they could influence not just the future but the present, shaping events and people's lives according to their own design. Elon felt a mix of disbelief and anger. How could something like this even be possible? How have they been controlling events around me? Dr. Johnson leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "The key here is that you're a part of their plan, Elon. Whether you like it or not, you've been chosen. You've been positioned at the center of this movement. I believe they've been nudging you toward the path you've taken, guiding you, ensuring that you make certain choices, create certain technologies, and influence the world in specific ways." Elon shook his head in frustration. "But I've made these decisions myself. I've pushed forward because I believe in these ideas. Space exploration, electric cars, these are things I chose to do, not because someone told me to." Dr. Johnson gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. "Perhaps. But when you're dealing with predictive programming, free will becomes a complicated concept. They might not be forcing you to make these decisions, but they're predicting that you will. They've been studying the patterns of your mind, your ambitions. The choices you've made so far have aligned perfectly with their agenda." Elon's mind raced. If what Dr. Johnson was saying was true, then his entire life, the very foundation of his success, could have been influenced by something beyond his control. His path to greatness had not been entirely his own. But the question remained, who were they? And what was their ultimate goal? "We need to find out more about this group," Elon said, his voice cold with determination. "Who are they? What do they want from me? And why Lily? What's her connection to all this?" Dr. Johnson paused, a look of concern crossing her face. "Elon, this is much more dangerous than you realize. If these people can influence your future, then they can influence everyone's future. If they've been monitoring your every move, they likely have the power to do the same to others. We're talking about a global-scale manipulation of reality. This is not something we can just walk away from." Elon stood up, pacing across the room. He wasn't about to back down. This was bigger than any business venture, bigger than any technological breakthrough. If someone was truly manipulating the world in such a profound way, it was his responsibility to confront it. "I don't care how dangerous it is," Elon said, his voice firm. "I'm not going to let them control my future or anyone else's. We need to find out who's behind this, and we need to stop them." The next few days were a blur of research, analysis, and planning. Elon and his team dove deep into every possible lead they could find about the group. They scoured databases, government records, and obscure underground forums. They even hired a few trusted hackers to dig into the most hidden corners of the digital world. What they uncovered was chilling. The group in question, known only by an enigmatic code name, the Architects, had been around for decades, operating in the shadows. They were a coalition of individuals with immense resources, both financial and intellectual, who had been studying the patterns of human behavior for years. They were not merely interested in predictive technology, they were obsessed with it. Their goal was to achieve what they called the singularity of destiny, a point at which they could control every major decision in the world by manipulating those individuals whose actions could shape the future. Elon's name appeared frequently in their research. His innovations, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, were all part of their long-term calculations. According to the documents they found, the architects had identified Elon as a pivotal figure in the course of human history. They believed that by ensuring he took certain paths, they could accelerate the timeline toward their vision of a controlled future. But why? Why him? And why had Lily been involved in their plans? Elon knew that to stop them, he would need to understand their motives and their methods. But the more he uncovered, the more unsettling the truth became. The architects were not simply trying to shape the future, they were trying to create it in their own image. They believed that humanity's free will was a flaw, one that needed to be corrected. By controlling key individuals like Elon, they could ensure that the world followed their predetermined course. As the days wore on, the gravity of the situation became clear. The countdown wasn't just about time running out, it was about a ticking clock to an event that the architects had engineered. And if Elon didn't find a way to stop them, the future of the world could be locked in a cage of their design. As the reality of the architect's influence sank in, Elon felt a deep unease settle over him. The walls seemed to close in around him as he grappled with the weight of what he had uncovered. The architects had planned everything, the technologies, the strategies, even the paths he had taken. The very future he had worked toward was not his own, but a carefully constructed illusion designed by someone else. Elon had always been the type of person to believe in the power of individual will. His success was built on defying expectations, breaking boundaries, and doing what others thought was impossible. But this revelation left him wondering if the boundaries had been drawn for him all along. Was there any way to truly break free? He spent sleepless nights in his office, surrounded by papers, research notes, and encrypted files on his computer. His mind, once so clear and focused, now felt like a maze, each turn leading to more questions, more unknowns. But one thing was clear. He wasn't going to let the architects win. Not without a fight. It was time to act. Elon couldn't keep playing by their rules. If they had engineered this entire game, then he needed to change the game. And to do that, he had to make a choice that would define not just his future, but the future of humanity. The first step was to contact Lily again. He needed her help, but this time, he wasn't going to approach the situation with uncertainty. He was going to confront her directly, demanding answers about the role she had played in all of this. He had to know if she truly understood the scope of what was happening, or if she was simply a pawn in someone else's game. The next morning, he arranged another meeting with her. As he walked into the room where he had met her before, he felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. This time, there was no uncertainty. He was no longer looking for reassurance or answers. He was looking for a way to fight back. Lily was already there, waiting for him. She sat at the same small table, her posture calm and collected, as if she had expected his arrival. There was no sign of fear or hesitation in her eyes. She was, in many ways, the opposite of Elon, a child with the wisdom of someone far beyond her years. "Elon," she said softly as he entered, her voice almost serene. "I knew you would come back." "I'm done with questions, Lily," Elon said, his voice firm. "I need answers, and I need your help." Lily's eyes flickered with something, a mix of understanding and something deeper, darker. "You've learned too much already, haven't you? You can feel it, can't you? The weight of all this, pressing down on you. But you have to understand, Elon. This is bigger than you, bigger than any of us." "I don't care how big it is," Elon replied, his voice unwavering. "I'm not going to let them control everything. If there's one thing I've learned in my life, it's that we always have a choice. So tell me, Lily, what's the real plan? Why have they been manipulating me? And why have you been a part of it?" Lily looked at him, her gaze deep and knowing. "The architects have been watching you for a long time. They knew your potential before you did. They knew that you would be the one to lead humanity into the next era. But they also knew that the future needed to be shaped with precision. They needed someone like you, a visionary, an innovator, but someone who could be steered, who could be guided. You were always meant to be a tool in their plan." Elon's heart tightened at her words. He had always believed in his ability to change the world, to make decisions that could shape the course of history. But now, he was learning that those decisions might not have been his at all. You're saying my whole life, my work, my inventions, they were all part of their plan? Elon's voice trembled for the first time, the weight of the realization hitting him hard. Lily nodded. They needed you to create the technologies that would shape the future: electric cars, space exploration, AI. All of it. They knew that with your innovations, they could shape the trajectory of humanity's path. And when they saw the countdown approaching, they knew they needed you more than ever. You're part of something bigger than you realize. They chose you because of your mind, your ability to think beyond the present. But in the end, it was never about you being the hero. It was always about control. Elon clenched his fists, anger rising within him. He had worked so hard, sacrificed so much for his vision of a better future. Yet now he realized it was all part of someone else's game. But he wasn't going to sit idly by and let it happen. He had never been one to back down from a challenge, and this was the ultimate challenge. I won't be controlled, Elon said, his voice low and determined. I'm not going to let anyone dictate the future, not even if they've been planning it for decades. Lily's eyes softened, and for the first time, Elon saw a flicker of concern in her gaze. You don't understand, Elon. It's not just about you anymore. It's about the future of all humanity. The architects have made their move, and they've set the pieces in place. There's no going back. Elon paused, considering her words. So what? I just let them win? I've already done what they wanted, helped shape the future they envisioned. But it's my future, too, and I'm going to take control of it. Lily stood up, her expression unreadable. You're making a choice. I can't say whether it's the right one, but if you choose to defy the architects, there will be consequences. Elon took a step forward, meeting her gaze. I'm willing to face whatever comes, because I know this. The future isn't theirs to control. It's ours, and I'm not going to let anyone take that away. Lily didn't respond immediately. She simply nodded, as if acknowledging the weight of his decision. Then, she said quietly, you may be right, Elon. The future isn't theirs to control. But the countdown, it's already started, and time is running out. As Elon left the room, a sense of urgency began to wash over him. Lily's words echoed in his mind. The countdown has already started. But no matter what lay ahead, he was resolute. He would not let anyone control his future. He would fight for the choices he had made, and for the ones he had yet to make. The game had changed, and now, Elon Musk was ready to play his own hand. Elon could feel the weight of his decision hanging over him like a storm cloud. The realization that the architects had been manipulating his every move was a bitter pill to swallow. Yet, even with this knowledge, he couldn't shake the determination that had driven him to where he was today. He had always fought for what he believed in, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. And now, the stakes were higher than ever before. Lily's warning about the countdown lingered in his mind, and the more he thought about it, the more it felt like an inescapable truth. Time was running out. But running out for what? What exactly would happen once the clock hit zero? He didn't know. And that was the most terrifying part. Determined to find out more, Elon doubled down on his investigation into the architects and the mysterious countdown. He called on his most trusted allies, Dr. Amelia Johnson, Greg, and a few other high-level security experts who had helped him in the past. Together, they began to sift through the mountains of data Elon had accumulated, hoping to uncover any clue that could explain what was about to happen. But the more they dug, the more elusive the answers became. They found no clear timeline or specific event tied to the countdown. Instead, it was as though the countdown was a force in and of itself, a ticking clock that could trigger a chain of events, an irreversible shift in the fabric of reality itself. After hours of analysis, Dr. Johnson spoke up, breaking the silence that had settled over the room. Elon, I've been looking at the patterns we've uncovered, and I think I may have found something. The countdown isn't tied to a specific date or event. It's tied to your actions, your decisions. It seems like the architects have been influencing the timeline, ensuring that certain moments in your life unfold in very particular ways. Elon furrowed his brow. What do you mean? Are you saying they can control the future based on my choices? Yes, she replied, her voice steady. Every major decision you've made, whether it's been launching SpaceX, developing Tesla, or even Neuralink, has been a part of a larger sequence of events. They've been guiding you, ensuring that you make the right moves at the right time. And now, they're watching as you take the next step. Elon's mind raced. But if I'm truly making these choices, then how are they controlling me? What's their endgame? Dr. Johnson leaned in, her expression grave. That's the part I'm still trying to understand. The architects don't want to control you. They want to control the future itself. And you, Elon, are a pivotal piece in that future. They've shaped you, but now, they need you to make the final choices that will either lead to their vision or stop them from achieving it. The room fell silent. Elon felt the enormity of the situation crashing down on him. The architects weren't just playing a game. They were playing for the future of humanity. And Elon, for better or worse, was their key player. We can't let them win, Elon said, his voice sharp. I have to know what they're planning. I have to stop them before it's too late. Greg, who had been listening intently, spoke up. We may not know exactly what the architects are planning, but we do know this. They've been watching you for a reason. If you're truly the key to their plan, that means you have something they want, something they need to succeed. The question is, what is it? Elon thought for a moment, piecing the puzzle together. I've always believed that technology could change the world. That's what I've been working toward all these years. I thought I was doing it to help humanity, bringing sustainable energy to the world, colonizing Mars, advancing AI. But maybe those weren't just my ideas. Maybe they've been steering me toward these breakthroughs all along, shaping my mind and my actions to fit their grand design. Dr. Johnson nodded thoughtfully. Exactly. And if you're the one who can help them reach their goal, they'll stop at nothing to ensure you make the right decisions. That's why they've been tracking your every move, your every innovation. Elon's thoughts swirled. He had always thought of himself as a pioneer, someone who forged his own path, who defied the odds. But now, the idea that his entire life had been orchestrated by the architects felt like a betrayal. Every dream he had chased, every risk he had taken, might have been part of a bigger plan that wasn't his own. But there was no time to dwell on that now. The clock was ticking, and Elon needed to make a choice. He had to stop the architects before their plan came to fruition. He turned to Dr. Johnson and the team. We need to find a way to disrupt their influence. We need to figure out how to break the cycle they've set up. If we can stop the countdown, we can stop their plan from succeeding. Greg nodded. We've been analyzing the architects' tactics, and I think we may have a lead. There's a system they've been using to communicate, a back-channel encrypted network that they've been monitoring. It's possible that if we can break into that network, we'll be able to find out exactly what their next move is. Elon's eyes narrowed. Do it. We don't have much time. The team worked tirelessly, poring over the data, decrypting codes, and tracing digital breadcrumbs that might lead them to the heart of the architect's plan. It was a race against time. Every moment that passed felt like it brought them closer to an inevitable disaster. Then, late one night, they finally cracked it. They managed to tap into a secure communication channel that the architects had been using to coordinate their activities. Elon's heart pounded in his chest as he read the first few messages. It was a list of dates, locations, and specific events that were tied to his major decisions. But buried within the code, he found something that made his blood run cold, a date. The date of the final phase of their plan. And it was soon. Elon knew what he had to do. He couldn't wait any longer. The time to act was now. But what action could he take to stop the architects without knowing the full extent of their plan? He had no choice but to trust his instincts and take the biggest risk of his life. Elon Musk stood before the enormous screen in his private operations room, the encrypted messages from the architects flickering before him like a map of his own destiny. He had been so focused on the present, on the projects that had occupied his every waking moment, that he had never considered the possibility that his entire trajectory had been calculated long before he even made his first groundbreaking move. The overwhelming weight of that realization threatened to crush him, but he couldn't afford to succumb to despair. He had made a promise to himself, and now he had to see it through. The countdown was nearing its final stages. The moment was fast approaching where the architects would set their final phase in motion. Their plan was incredibly intricate, woven into the very fabric of his achievements and decisions. But what exactly would happen once it was set into motion? Elon had no idea, but he couldn't afford to wait to find out. The time for action was now. Dr. Amelia Johnson and Greg were still with him in the room, analyzing the encrypted messages, trying to piece together any additional clues that might explain the architect's full strategy. But each new line of code they decrypted only led to more questions, more uncertainty. The architects had left no trail, no simple explanation. Every message was shrouded in cryptic language and sophisticated algorithms that seemed beyond human comprehension. Anything new? Elon asked, his voice tight with anxiety. Dr. Johnson rubbed her eyes, exhaustion showing on her face. Not much. The messages are more fragmented now, as though they're covering their tracks. But from what we can tell, they've already implemented the final pieces of their plan. The countdown isn't just symbolic. It's a countdown to the activation of their full network. Everything they've set in motion will culminate soon. Elon felt a surge of panic grip his chest. What does that mean for the rest of the world? What happens when the clock hits zero? Greg leaned in, his face grim. That's the part we don't know, Elon. The system they've put in place is layered with redundancies. Every breakthrough you've had, every major decision you've made, has been feeding into this system. The countdown isn't about a specific event, it's about the tipping point. Once that clock hits zero, everything will be locked into place. The architects will have total control over humanity's next steps. Elon ran a hand through his hair, struggling to process the magnitude of what he was hearing. A plan this elaborate had been set in motion decades ago, and now, all of it was about to culminate. They weren't just manipulating his career. They were manipulating the very direction of humanity itself. Is there any way to stop it? Elon asked, his voice low. Dr. Johnson shook her head, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her. We've tried everything we can think of. The only way to stop them might be to disrupt the very system they've built. But that's easier said than done. They've created layers of security that would take months to crack. And we don't have that much time. Elon's mind raced. Disrupt the system. It was the only option left, but how? The world's most powerful technologies, the innovations he had pioneered, all of it had been part of their plan. The key to stopping the architects wasn't just to fight them head-on. It was to tear down the very foundations they had constructed around him. He glanced at the countdown again, which was now flashing in red. There was no time to waste. I'll have to go directly to the source, Elon said with newfound clarity. I can't afford to wait for us to break through their defenses. I'll go to the heart of their operation myself. Greg's eyes widened. Are you sure about this? If you're wrong, we might lose everything. The network is built into every major infrastructure we have, every financial system, every piece of technology. I know, Elon replied, his voice hard. But if I don't, we'll never have a chance to stop them. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Elon couldn't afford to waste any time. He needed to go straight to the source of the architect's network, to wherever they were controlling things from. The team worked in overdrive, setting up a plan to break into a highly secure facility deep within the heart of their operations. They had traced the encrypted messages to a hidden complex, a facility designed to house the architect's most sensitive operations. And it was the last place Elon wanted to go. But it was also the only place where he might have a shot at stopping the countdown. Elon kept the plan close to the chest. He didn't want to involve anyone who might be compromised or manipulated by the architects. It was a solo mission, one that would require every ounce of skill and ingenuity he had. The facility was located on a remote island, cut off from the rest of the world. It was a fortress, equipped with the latest security measures and guarded by an army of elite operatives. To enter was to face an almost certain death sentence. But for Elon, it was the only option. With the help of his team, he managed to secure a private plane and all the necessary tools to infiltrate the facility. He spent days preparing, meticulously going over the plan again and again. His every move would have to be precise. There would be no room for error. As he boarded the plane, a sense of finality washed over him. This was it, the moment he had been preparing for. There would be no turning back. The future of the world, his life, and the choices that had led him here all rested on this one mission. He wasn't sure what to expect once he reached the facility, but he knew one thing for certain. He had to be ready for anything. This was the moment where everything would either fall into place, or everything would collapse. And if the architects were truly as powerful as they seemed, then the consequences of failure would be catastrophic. As the plane soared through the night sky, Elon couldn't help but reflect on the path that had led him here. From his early days of launching rockets to the moment he had met Lily, everything had been leading to this confrontation. He had always believed in the power of human ingenuity, the ability to defy the odds and make the impossible possible. But now, as he stared out at the vast expanse of the ocean below, he realized that this mission wasn't just about technology. It was about something much deeper. It was about the human spirit, the ability to choose, to resist control, and to shape the future on our own terms. This was a battle for freedom, for the future of humanity, and Elon Musk was determined to see it through to the end. The night air was cool as Elon Musk's private plane descended toward the remote island. Below him, the dark silhouette of the fortress loomed like a shadow in the vast ocean. Every second felt like an eternity, each beat of his heart matching the ticking of the clock that had been counting down to this moment. The architects had been playing a game far beyond his comprehension, but now it was his turn to make a move. As the plane touched down on the secluded runway, the gravity of what he was about to do hit him with full force. The island was an impenetrable fortress, guarded by layers of security, both digital and physical. A single wrong move could result in capture, or worse, death. But Elon wasn't here to just infiltrate their system. He was here to confront the architects directly. He stepped off the plane, his mind sharpened by the clarity of his mission. He couldn't afford to second-guess himself now. Time was running out, and the countdown was closing in on its final moments. Greg had done his part, setting up a series of distractions and breaches to confuse the system and disrupt the island's security measures. Elon's only job now was to get inside, find the core of the architect's operations, and figure out how to shut it all down before they could implement their final phase. The island was eerily quiet, and the air felt dense with tension. Elon moved swiftly through the overgrown jungle that surrounded the facility, keeping to the shadows. He couldn't let the guards see him. The architects had eyes everywhere, and he wasn't about to walk into their trap unprepared. He arrived at a massive steel door, the entrance to the heart of the fortress. The security systems were top-tier, with biometric scanners, retinal scans, and multiple levels of encryption. Elon took a deep breath and activated the device Greg had smuggled to him, a portable decryption tool that had bypassed the system's first layer. As the door clicked open, he moved quickly, slipping inside. The dimly lit hallway stretched before him, the hum of advanced technology vibrating through the walls. Each step he took felt heavy, like a decision that could tip the scales of fate. He passed several control rooms, each filled with monitors displaying critical data, surveillance footage, real-time encryption, and tracking systems. He was getting closer to the heart of the architect's operation, but with each step, he felt more exposed. Finally, he reached the central command room. The door was heavily fortified, but with the decryption tool still in hand, he managed to unlock it. The room beyond was nothing like he had expected. It was sleek and futuristic, filled with holographic interfaces and rows of servers that stretched from floor to ceiling. At the center stood a massive terminal, humming with activity. This was the nerve center of their operation. Elon took a step forward and accessed the terminal. His fingers flew over the controls, quickly bypassing the layers of security. The system resisted at first, but Elon's mind raced faster than the algorithms. He had spent his life perfecting systems, understanding their weaknesses. This was no different. As he breached the final layer of encryption, the terminal blinked to life, revealing a series of messages and instructions. But it wasn't just data that appeared. It was a face. Lily's face. For a moment, Elon froze. The girl who had whispered those mysterious words to him in McDonald's, the girl who had been at the center of his unraveling world, was now staring back at him from the terminal. Elon, her voice echoed through the room, her tone both soft and unsettling. I knew you would come here. But you have to understand, it's too late now. His heart skipped a beat. What is this? What are you doing, Lily? Are you one of the architects? Her expression softened, but there was a depth of sadness in her eyes. No, I'm not one of the architects, but I was part of their plan. They needed me to guide you, to help you make the right choices, to push you to this moment. I never wanted this. I never wanted you to be caught in their web. But now, you've reached the end of the road. The countdown is complete. Elon felt the cold grip of realization tighten around his chest. The countdown? What's going to happen when it reaches 0? What's their plan, Lily? She sighed deeply. The countdown was never about technology, Elon. It wasn't about SpaceX or Tesla or even Neuralink. It was about control. The architects were never interested in the future you thought you were creating. They wanted to shape the course of humanity's development, their way, not yours. And you were the perfect tool to do it. Elon's mind spun, his thoughts fragmented. Everything he had worked for, everything he had believed in, it was all a part of a plan he had never even understood. He had been the puppet, and the strings had been pulled by forces he could never have imagined. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Elon demanded, his voice breaking with frustration. Why didn't you warn me about what was really happening? Lily's eyes welled with tears. I couldn't. They were always watching me. I couldn't break free. I wanted to help you, Elon, but I was trapped too. We both were. The terminal flickered, and a new screen appeared. This time, the face of an older man appeared, someone unfamiliar to Elon. Elon Musk, the man's voice boomed, cold and authoritative. I hope you understand now. Your choices have led you here, but you're too late. The future we've planned is already in motion. You can't stop it. Elon's blood ran cold. Who are you? I am the architect, the man said, a thin smile creeping across his face. And now, the final phase is about to begin. Your influence on the world has been invaluable, Elon. But now, you'll step aside. Humanity's future is no longer yours to decide. The finality of the words hit Elon like a punch to the gut. He wasn't in control anymore. The architects had orchestrated everything. His whole life, his successes, his failures, his innovations, had been steps in a predetermined game, one that he had been powerless to change. He felt a surge of anger rise within him. No, he would not accept this. He had never let anyone control his destiny, and he wasn't about to start now. I won't let you do this, Elon said through gritted teeth, standing tall despite the crushing weight of the situation. I won't let you control the future. With that, he turned and slammed his hand down on the terminal's shutdown button. The system resisted, locking up with a final beep. But Elon wasn't about to give up. He had no choice now. This was the moment where he would either change the course of humanity or lose everything. What would you do if you learned your entire life had been planned for you? Would you accept your fate, or would you fight to change it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Elon's journey is far from over. Elon Musk's hand hovered over the terminal's shutdown button, his mind racing. The words of the mysterious man, the so-called architect, echoed in his mind. He had just made a decision that could either save the future or condemn it entirely. But there was no going back now. Elon's whole life had been shaped by forces beyond his control, and yet, here he stood, an unwilling pawn, poised to make the one move that could destroy everything they had built. The moment his hand hit the button, the terminal let out a sharp electronic whine. It didn't respond immediately. Elon's heart pounded in his chest as he waited for the system to crash. But instead, the screen flickered, and a new set of messages began to scroll across the screen. Messages he didn't understand. Lily's face appeared again. But this time, it wasn't a peaceful expression. There was a sense of urgency in her eyes. Elon, you don't understand. The countdown isn't just about technology. It's a biological event. If you stop it now, it could have irreversible consequences. You're tampering with something that even the architects don't fully understand. Please, stop. The words hit Elon with the force of a freight train. A biological event? What was she talking about? He had thought it was all about control, about ensuring that humanity's next steps were guided by the architects. But now, it seemed there was something much bigger at play, something far more dangerous. Before he could respond, the terminal blinked red. The countdown timer flashed on the screen. 15 minutes remaining. Stop it. Lily's voice cried out, but her image was beginning to fade. You have to understand. You're running out of time. Don't let them win. You're the key, Elon. You're the only one who can stop it, but not this way. There's another way. Please listen to me. Elon's mind was a whirlwind of questions. What did she mean? What was the real purpose behind all of this? Was the architects just a front for something far more sinister? He thought back to the vision of the future he had always fought for. A future of progress, exploration, and freedom. Was that vision just an illusion? Had he truly been nothing more than a tool in someone else's game? The countdown continued to tick down. 13 minutes remaining. He had no more time to debate. This was it. The future was on the line, and he could feel the weight of his choices pressing down on him more than ever before. Elon didn't trust the architects. He didn't trust the man on the screen who had called himself the architect. But Lily had never lied to him. She had always been his guide, his moral compass in this nightmare. He had to trust her, even if it meant risking everything he had worked for. With a deep breath, Elon slammed his fist into the terminal again, this time targeting the core's shutdown function. The room filled with a low rumble, and for a moment, the countdown paused, 12 minutes remaining. The terminal flickered again, and this time, a new message appeared. It wasn't from Lily. It was a warning. If you disrupt the system, it will trigger a cascade failure. The biological event cannot be stopped once it has started. All will be lost. The words made his stomach twist. What was this biological event? What would it mean for the world if he didn't stop the countdown? He didn't have answers. But he knew one thing for certain. The architects were not the ones who would dictate humanity's future. Not if he had any say in it. Before he could think any further, the massive doors to the command center began to open. A sharp, mechanical hiss signaled that the fortress's security system had been triggered. He wasn't alone anymore. The guards, the agents of the architects, were closing in on him. Think, Elon. Think, he muttered to himself, trying to block out the rising panic in his chest. He could hear footsteps growing louder as the doors slid open completely. With no time to waste, Elon grabbed the encrypted flash drive from his jacket pocket, the one that held his last hope of preventing whatever catastrophic event was about to unfold. He ran, knowing the only way out was through the lower levels. As he sprinted through the dimly lit hallways, the architect's agents in pursuit, his mind kept racing. What was the biological event? What would happen if the countdown reached 0? He couldn't afford to let them win. Not after everything he had learned, everything he had sacrificed. 10 minutes remaining. His path was blocked. A group of heavily armed security personnel had arrived, blocking the hallway ahead of him. Elon's heart hammered in his chest as he weighed his options. He was surrounded, and there was nowhere to run. But then, something shifted. A faint voice echoed through his earpiece. Elon, it was Greg. We've located the override control. It's not much, but it might be enough to stop the countdown remotely. It's in the lab. Get there now. Do you know where it is? Elon asked, trying to steady his breathing. Greg hesitated. Yes, but it's heavily secured. The only way you'll reach it is through the central elevator shaft. I'm unlocking it now. The countdown clock flashed again. 9 minutes remaining. Elon didn't waste another second. He turned, sprinting back toward the elevator shaft that led to the lab, his last chance. He could hear the agents closing in, their footsteps thundering behind him. He had only one shot. He couldn't afford to fail. The elevator doors opened just as he reached them, and he jumped inside. The tension in the air was palpable. He didn't know what awaited him, but he couldn't stop now. As the elevator descended, Elon's mind raced. He thought about everything that had led him here. His dreams of changing the world, his relentless drive, the mistakes he had made. Was it all for nothing? Could he still stop the architects and save humanity from the unseen forces that had manipulated his every move? The elevator slowed to a stop. The doors opened with a mechanical hiss. He was in the lab. Time was almost up. 7 minutes remaining. The lab was a vast, sterile space, illuminated by fluorescent lights that flickered occasionally, casting an unsettling glow across the room. Elon stepped cautiously inside, his senses on high alert. This wasn't just a high-tech facility. It was the epicenter of the final phase of the architect's plan. Every surface, every device in this room had been crafted for one purpose: to ensure that humanity's future was set in stone, under their control. He couldn't allow that to happen. Not after everything he'd learned. The countdown timer loomed in his mind, the seconds ticking away relentlessly. 7 minutes remaining. Elon's pulse quickened as he scanned the lab. It was eerily quiet, save for the soft hum of machines. The room stretched out before him like a maze, filled with rows of servers, control panels, and monitors, all displaying cryptic data that meant nothing to him in this moment. He had one goal: reach the override control. Greg's voice crackled through his earpiece. Elon, the override control is in the back of the lab, past the central server cluster. You need to deactivate the security locks first. The system's already adapted to our breach. It's all you now. Elon nodded, though Greg couldn't see him. His mind raced as he moved swiftly through the lab, every step calculated, every sound amplified. The walls felt like they were closing in. The deeper he ventured, the more he felt the weight of his task. Not just stopping the countdown, but confronting everything he had unknowingly participated in. His eyes darted to the screens on the walls, which displayed intricate maps of global networks, financial systems, and human behavior. His own projects, SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, were all there, interconnected in ways that made him uneasy. The labyrinth wasn't just physical. It was psychological, emotional, a maze of his own life's work that had been manipulated and twisted for some greater purpose. 5 minutes remaining. Elon paused in front of the central server cluster. There were no visible controls, only a large panel embedded in the wall. This was where the first layer of security had been set up to prevent unauthorized access. As he examined the panel, his mind flashed back to the early days of his career. The first time he had hacked into systems, the early struggles to break through barriers that seemed insurmountable. It was the same drive, the same hunger for progress that had brought him to this moment. He could do this. He had to. He crouched down, pulling a small device from his belt, a compact, advanced hacking tool Greg had designed. His fingers flew over the keypad, connecting with the system's intricate layers of security. The machine beeped softly as it began to decode the locks. 3 minutes remaining. The screen in front of Elon blinked red, and a warning message appeared. Unauthorized access detected. Lockdown initiated. A chill ran down his spine. They had detected his breach. The fortress was coming to life. A loud alarm blared, and the lights in the lab flickered violently. The entire facility seemed to shake, as if the walls themselves were closing in on him. Stay focused. Greg's voice came through the earpiece, urgent and commanding. You've got this. The system is trying to lock you out, but the security's failing. It's almost there, Elon. You've just got a few more seconds. Elon gritted his teeth and forced himself to ignore the panic rising in his chest. He had faced impossible odds before. This was no different. Sweat dripped down his brow as he worked faster, his mind racing. He could hear the sound of boots pounding in the hallway outside. The agents were closing in. Just as the system began to shut him out completely, the panel emitted a final, victorious beep. The lock was broken. The countdown timer on the main screen flashed 1 minute remaining. Elon bolted forward to the final control terminal. He inserted the flash drive that Greg had prepared, and the system automatically recognized it. The screen went black for a moment, as if the entire facility was holding its breath. Then, a new interface appeared. It was the core command of the architect's plan, the culmination of everything they had worked for. There were 2 options. 1. Activate the final phase. 2. Override and cancel countdown. It was a simple choice, but the weight of it was unimaginable. Elon's fingers hovered over the keys. For a moment, the reality of what he was about to do hit him hard. If he canceled the countdown, what would be the consequences? Would it be a permanent halt to humanity's trajectory, or would it be something far worse? He didn't have answers. But the future of humanity had never been in the hands of a single person before. And now it was. 30 seconds remaining. The footsteps outside grew louder. The agents were nearly upon him. Elon slammed his finger down on the override and cancel countdown option, praying that this was the right decision. The system flashed again, and then the lights in the lab dimmed. The countdown timer froze at midnight. For a long moment, everything was silent. Elon exhaled a shaky breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Had he done it? Had he stopped the machine that would have reshaped the world in the architect's image? The answer came almost immediately. The entire facility shook. A low rumble reverberated through the walls, the floor vibrating beneath his feet. The screens around him flickered erratically, showing glimpses of data streams, code, and faces, the architect's faces. The countdown may have stopped, but something else was happening. Something far more dangerous. Elon, Greg's voice crackled in his earpiece. You've done it, but you need to get out of there. Now. They're activating their fail-safes. The whole system is collapsing. You're in the heart of it. Get to the exit before it's too late. Elon didn't need to be told twice. He turned and sprinted toward the exit, his legs carrying him faster than they ever had before. The sound of alarms and the crash of metal echoed around him as the facility seemed to implode. The entire fortress seemed to groan as if it were alive and dying at the same time. The walls trembled under the pressure of collapsing systems, and the lights flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows over the lab as Elon sprinted for the exit. His mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, none of them fully formed. Had he truly stopped the architect's plan, or had he just set something far worse into motion? The rumbling grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath his feet. Panic rose in his chest, but he didn't have time to think about it. He had to get out. Elon charged down the same dark hallway he had come through earlier, the footsteps of the agents still echoing in his mind. He didn't dare look back. Every part of him screamed to keep moving forward, to get out of this nightmare before it swallowed him whole. But the walls felt like they were closing in, the air thick with the electric hum of machines in distress. 1 minute remaining. The exit was ahead, but it seemed so far. The doors, which had once felt like a distant hope, now felt like they might be locked forever. The alarms blared louder, almost as if they were warning him that there was no escape. He could hear his breathing, shallow and quick, as his body pushed itself to its limits. Every muscle screamed, every nerve was on edge, but he couldn't stop. Not now. He rounded a corner, barely avoiding a group of the architect's agents who had just appeared out of nowhere, their footsteps heavy and deliberate. Elon pressed his back against the cold concrete wall, holding his breath, hoping they wouldn't notice him. His heart raced as he waited for the sound of them to pass. 30 seconds remaining. Time felt like it was slipping away, and yet, every second seemed to stretch out longer than the last. Elon moved with precision now, his body trained to think quickly and act faster. He knew he had no choice but to reach the emergency exit at the end of the hallway. He took a deep breath and pushed himself off the wall, just as the agents passed him by. They didn't notice him, and for a fleeting moment, Elon allowed himself to feel a sense of victory. But there was no time to celebrate. He had to keep moving. With one final sprint, Elon reached the exit doors. His hands flew to the panel, desperate to open them, but they refused to budge. The security system was locking them down. His pulse shot through his chest. 10 seconds remaining. Greg. Elon shouted into the earpiece, his voice strained. I need help. The exit's locked. I can't get out. Hold on, Elon. Greg's voice crackled, urgent. I'm unlocking the system remotely. You've got 5 seconds. Elon turned and scanned the hallway behind him. The agents were getting closer, and he knew they wouldn't hesitate to take him down if they found him. His entire body tensed, every muscle coiled as he waited for the door to open. 5 seconds remaining. Just as the countdown hit 0, the door clicked open with a loud mechanical whir. Elon wasted no time. He sprinted through the door and into the open air, the cool night breeze hitting his face as he stumbled out onto the grounds of the fortress. He was free, but the relief was short-lived. The facility behind him was shaking violently now, and the entire structure was beginning to implode. The sound of metal twisting and collapsing filled the air as explosions rang out, signaling the end of the architect's fortress. Elon didn't look back. He had no time. As he sprinted across the open field toward the waiting helicopter, his thoughts raced. He had stopped the countdown, but the chaos had only just begun. What had he unleashed? What had the architects been planning all along? And more importantly, Who were they? The helicopter's blades whipped the air, and a few seconds later, Elon was airborne, the fortress slowly disappearing behind him. But even as the ground below him grew smaller, the questions in his mind grew larger. His whole life had led to this point, yet it felt like nothing had been resolved. There was so much more to uncover, so much more at stake. The mission wasn't over. The architect's influence might have been shaken, but their reach was global. And now, he had more than just a plan to stop them. He had a purpose, one that would take him deep into the heart of the mystery they had created. But as the helicopter soared into the night sky, Elon felt the weight of it all settling over him. The architects weren't just an organization. They were a part of something much larger, something far beyond his understanding. Greg's voice came through his earpiece, breaking him from his thoughts. Elon, we're tracking the data. The codes you retrieved, they're not just about global control. There's a deeper layer to this. You need to prepare yourself. Elon's heart sank. What do you mean? We're still decoding the files, but there's something about the biological event you stopped. It wasn't just a plan to control humanity's resources or technological progress. It's something more, interdimensional. Elon's head spun. What do you mean, interdimensional? Are you telling me that they had access to alternate realities? How is that even possible? Greg paused. It's not just access, Elon. They were planning to merge realities, to combine dimensions, to manipulate the fabric of reality itself. They were going to bring other worlds into ours. Elon felt a chill spread down his spine. The implications were staggering. The architects weren't just after control over humanity. They were playing with the very fabric of existence. We're going to need more than just a plan to stop them, Elon muttered to himself. We're going to need to understand everything they were working on. Everything. The helicopter cut through the night sky, the city lights below blinking like distant stars. Elon Musk sat in silence, staring out of the window. His mind was a swirl of thoughts, questions with no clear answers. The night had been a blur of chaos, danger, and a revelation that shook him to his core. The architects hadn't been aiming for world domination. They had been after something far more insidious, control over the very nature of existence itself. Merging dimensions? Manipulating realities? It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, yet it was real. Elon wasn't just fighting against an organization. He was battling something far more powerful, far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The helicopter descended slowly, the lights of the city growing brighter, the hum of the rotors filling the air. Elon didn't even register the familiar surroundings at first. His thoughts were consumed by the weight of the knowledge he had just uncovered. Greg's voice crackled in his earpiece, cutting through his reverie. Elon, we've got a problem. I've been analyzing the data you retrieved. The biological event you stopped, it's not just contained in that facility. It's already spread globally. Elon's eyes widened. What do you mean, spread? How? Greg hesitated. It's subtle. A ripple effect. When the countdown stopped, the system didn't just halt. It triggered an invisible signal, like a virus, but far more complex. It's infecting global networks, influencing minds, and even shifting certain realities. Elon ran a hand through his hair, trying to process what Greg was saying. Wait, are you telling me that the entire planet could be experiencing some kind of dimensional shift right now? Greg's voice was grim. Yes. I'm not sure how much control the architects had over this, but it's spreading. We're seeing reports of strange anomalies, people experiencing déjà vu, glitches in the fabric of time and space, random objects appearing and disappearing, as if reality itself is being tampered with. Elon's stomach churned. This was no longer just about stopping a countdown or thwarting a global conspiracy. He was dealing with a fundamental breakdown in the way the universe operated. The helicopter touched down on the roof of his private facility, and Elon barely noticed the smooth landing. His thoughts were elsewhere, consumed by the magnitude of what Greg had just shared. The moment the rotors stopped spinning, Elon was out of the helicopter, moving quickly toward the building. His mind was working at full speed. If the architects had really initiated a ripple effect, then they had no idea how far-reaching their plan could be. The very fabric of reality was fragile, and if it were unraveling now, how could he possibly fix it? Inside, the building was eerily quiet. He walked briskly down the hallway to his office, Greg already waiting for him at the console, his face tense. The room was filled with monitors, all flashing with data and strange signals that Elon didn't fully understand. "We've been tracking the anomalies, Elon," Greg said, his voice steady but filled with concern. "It's not just minor glitches anymore. We've identified over 24 cases of reality shifts already. There are patterns. It's almost like different versions of the world are overlapping." Elon leaned over the console, staring at the data that filled the screens. The patterns were unmistakable. They resembled ripples on the surface of water, spreading outward from a central point. And that central point, as Greg had suggested, was the biological event Elon had stopped earlier. "Is it possible to reverse it?" Elon asked, his voice strained. Greg shook his head. "I don't know. The data's incomplete, and I don't have enough time to run all the simulations. But one thing is clear. The longer this continues, the more likely we are to lose control over the boundaries of reality. If the architect's system remains active, even in a dormant state, they could finish what they started, merging dimensions permanently." Elon's heart sank. This wasn't just a fight to preserve the status quo. This was about survival, not just of humanity, but of reality itself. A sudden thought struck him. What if we could find out where the architect started this process? If we can trace it back to its source, maybe we can stop it from spreading any further. Greg nodded. "That might work. The data you retrieved points to a hidden facility, an off-the-grid location that the architects were using as a central hub for their operations. It's been encrypted, but I've got a partial location." Elon didn't hesitate. "Then we go there. Now." Without another word, they moved quickly. Greg activated the coordinates on the main terminal, and within minutes, Elon was already making plans for the next leg of this unpredictable journey. The plane ride to the mysterious facility was long, but Elon barely noticed the passing hours. He was lost in thought, staring out the window into the vast, dark sky. The weight of his decisions, of what he had uncovered, pressed heavily on him. He had to stop the architects, not just for the world's sake, but for the sake of everything that existed. If he failed now, if he didn't act quickly, reality itself could be shattered beyond repair. As the plane descended into the remote, heavily guarded location, Elon felt the familiar rush of adrenaline surge through him. He wasn't sure what he would find once they reached the facility, but he knew one thing for certain. He was running out of time. The remote facility was tucked away in a mountainous region, surrounded by dense forests that stretched for miles in every direction. As Elon Musk's private jet touched down on the small, makeshift runway, he could feel the weight of the situation closing in on him. The tension in the air was palpable, as if nature itself had grown aware of the unnatural forces at play. Greg, who had joined Elon on the flight, was already tapping away at his tablet, scanning the encrypted data they had pieced together. "We're close. The facility is located in a network of underground bunkers. It's hidden well, there's not much information on it, but what we have suggests it's the core of the architect's operations." Elon nodded, his eyes scanning the surroundings. The dense trees and rocky terrain didn't seem like the sort of place where the fate of reality could hang in the balance, but he had learned not to dismiss anything. Not after the night he'd had. The guards stationed at the entrance to the facility gave them a cursory look, but there was no challenge. Elon had made sure that no one would recognize him or Greg, at least not immediately. He needed the element of surprise. They were here to stop whatever the architects had been working on, and if they couldn't, the consequences would be catastrophic. Inside, the facility was unlike anything Elon had ever seen. The walls were lined with strange, high-tech equipment that hummed softly, almost as if it were alive. The air smelled sterile, cold, and metallic, as if the building itself had been designed to shield its inhabitants from the outside world. The quietness of it all felt wrong, an eerie silence that hung heavily in the air, pressing on their chests. Greg led the way, following the map they had deciphered, while Elon kept his senses sharp. Every corner, every door, every piece of equipment seemed like a potential danger. They had no idea who or what was inside. For all they knew, the architects had been waiting for them. They made their way deeper into the facility, passing rooms filled with glowing monitors displaying incomprehensible data. Some were familiar. Space-time equations, artificial intelligence protocols, neural network simulations. But others were disturbing. Codes that seemed to merge dimensions, threads of reality intersecting with one another in patterns that should have been impossible. "This is it," Greg whispered as they reached a large reinforced door at the end of the hall. He pulled out a small, high-tech device and activated it. The door clicked open, revealing a large central room bathed in a faint, greenish glow. The heart of the machine. Elon stepped forward cautiously, his heart hammering in his chest. The room was massive, with rows upon rows of servers, all linked together by glowing cables. In the center of the room stood a strange, circular structure. It looked like a massive, intricate web of metal and light, constantly shifting and evolving. Elon's eyes narrowed as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. "It's the core," Greg said, his voice barely audible. "This is where the dimensional merge began. The system that the architects created is powered by this structure. It's alive, in a sense." Elon moved closer, his breath catching in his throat. He could feel the energy emanating from the core. It wasn't just technology. It was something far more advanced, something far more dangerous. The architects had engineered it to bend the very fabric of reality itself. Greg continued, "If we can destroy the core, we can stop the merge. But we don't have much time. The system's already trying to reset itself." Elon's mind raced. He had no idea what this thing was capable of, but he knew one thing for sure. It couldn't be allowed to continue. They had to shut it down, or reality, as they knew it, would collapse. He approached the console beside the core, scanning the control interface. The code was unlike anything he'd ever seen before. Strings of symbols and numbers that seemed to defy logic. It wasn't just a complex encryption. It was a fusion of dimensions, a code that existed outside of normal time and space. "How do we stop it?" Elon asked, his voice tight with urgency. Greg studied the control panel, his eyes darting over the screen. "We'll have to initiate a full shutdown sequence. But it's risky. The system is designed to fight back. If we don't do it correctly, it could trigger the collapse instead of stopping it." Elon's pulse quickened. "We don't have a choice. We have to try." Greg nodded and began typing rapidly, inputting commands into the terminal. The air seemed to thicken, and a strange energy crackled in the room. The core's glowing patterns intensified, shifting and fluctuating wildly, as if it were reacting to their presence. Suddenly, alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the room as the system detected their intrusion. Elon's heart raced as he saw the countdown begin on a nearby screen. 5 minutes to system reset. "We're out of time," Elon shouted. Greg's fingers flew across the terminal. "I'm almost there. Just a little longer." The energy from the core surged, and the room seemed to warp around them. The walls flickered in and out of focus, time itself appearing to bend. Elon staggered, trying to maintain his balance as the very fabric of reality seemed to shift. "We need to finish this now," Elon shouted again, panic rising in his voice. Greg was sweating, his face strained with concentration. "I've almost got it. Just hold on." Suddenly, the system locked them out, the terminal flashing red with a warning message. "Security breach detected. Self-defense protocol initiated." The floor beneath them trembled as the core's power surged. Elon's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. The architects had designed this system to protect itself at all costs. If they didn't stop it, the core would trigger an irreversible chain reaction. With the countdown ticking away, Elon made a snap decision. He grabbed a nearby control panel and ripped it out of the wall, exposing a series of wires. "We have to disrupt the core's power source manually," he said, his voice tight with determination. Greg hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Let's do it." Together, they worked quickly, pulling wires, rerouting circuits, and triggering an emergency shutdown sequence. The core shuddered, its glow flickering as if it were struggling to hold itself together. The room began to hum with increasing intensity, the air thick with energy. 30 seconds remaining. Elon could feel the walls closing in again, the pressure mounting. But this time, it wasn't just the physical walls of the facility. It was the entire structure of reality itself threatening to collapse. 15 seconds. Elon's hands moved with precision, his mind focused entirely on the task at hand. One wrong move, and everything would be lost. 5 seconds. Greg pressed the final button, and for a moment, everything went still. The core's energy flickered out, and the alarms fell silent. The countdown stopped. Time seemed to return to its normal flow, the warping of reality finally coming to a halt. Elon exhaled a shaky breath, but his relief was short-lived. The room was still, and the fate of reality itself hung in the balance. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The room remained eerily still. For a brief moment, the hum of the core had stopped, and with it, the weight that had pressed against Elon's chest seemed to lift. The countdown had ceased, but the ticking in his mind hadn't. He knew the battle wasn't over. Stopping the core was only a temporary reprieve. Greg leaned back against a nearby console, wiping his forehead, his breath still heavy. That was close. I didn't think we'd make it in time. Elon didn't reply at first. His mind was still racing, thinking about the implications of everything they just encountered. The architects had been playing a dangerous game, manipulating the very laws of reality itself. But even with the core disabled, the ripple effect, the merging of dimensions, had already taken root. The fabric of existence had been tampered with, and it couldn't be undone with the flick of a switch. We've only bought ourselves time, Elon said, finally breaking the silence. But the damage is already done. The system has been triggered. There's no telling how deep the effects go or how far the ripple has spread. Greg nodded, looking grim. We've seen the reports. People are experiencing strange phenomena, like déjà vu, glitches in time, objects vanishing, even entire buildings seemingly shifting location. Reality itself is starting to bend. Elon's mind flashed back to the anomalies they had seen in the facility, codes merging realities, and the bizarre fluctuations in time and space. The architects had engineered something that wasn't just a system. It was a gateway, a tool to manipulate the very threads of existence. But why? Why would they want to do this? What's the purpose? Elon's voice was barely a whisper. Greg didn't have an answer. He was as perplexed as Elon, but there was a clear sense of urgency in his eyes. The problem is that the more we try to stop it, the more we risk accelerating it. These reality shifts are beyond anything we can control. Elon clenched his jaw, determination flooding his veins. We don't have the luxury of doing nothing. We need to understand how the architects connected all of this. If we can track the origin point of the first shift, where the dimensions started to bleed into each other, maybe we can reverse it. Greg thought for a moment before nodding. I think you're right, but we need more than just the data we have. We need to find the architects themselves. They're the key. As the pair left the facility, the outside world seemed to carry on, indifferent to the catastrophe they had narrowly avoided. Elon stepped into the waiting vehicle, and they drove off into the night. The world was still turning, but the universe itself was no longer the same. Elon stared out the window, his mind returning to the cryptic words of the architects. What if they weren't just after domination? What if they had seen something no one else could comprehend? What if the dimensional merge wasn't just an end, but a new beginning? Elon's thoughts were interrupted by the sharp tone of Greg's voice. Elon, I've just received a transmission. It's from one of our contacts. He's found something that might be important. Elon turned his attention back to Greg. Who? Alex, a colleague from our earlier investigations. He's been tracking the patterns of the reality shifts. He believes he's found an anomaly in the timeline. It's centered in an old research facility in the Arctic. He thinks it's connected to the architect's original work. Elon's eyes narrowed. The Arctic? That's where this all started. Greg nodded. It's possible. If the architects have a hidden base there, we might find something that could give us answers, or at least lead us to their next move. Elon tapped his fingers against the seat, his mind already racing. The Arctic. It had always been a place of mystery and secrets. If what Greg said was true, then it could hold the key to understanding everything. The purpose behind the architect's plan, the true nature of the dimensional merge, and maybe, just maybe, a way to stop it for good. Hours later, The aircraft carrying Elon and Greg soared over the frozen wastelands of the Arctic. The vast, snow-covered expanse stretched out endlessly beneath them, a cold, inhospitable place where the sun barely touched the land. The temperature outside the plane had dropped dramatically, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. "We're getting close," Greg said, adjusting the coordinates on his console. "Alex's signal is coming from deep underground. He's pinpointed a structure, but it's hidden beneath layers of ice. We'll need to dig to get to it." Elon's mind was elsewhere, thinking about the vastness of the Arctic, about how something so massive and powerful could be buried so deep, hidden from the world. It made him uneasy. The plane descended, its engines roaring against the thick Arctic winds. It landed with a jarring thud on the snow-covered runway, and Elon and Greg quickly exited. The wind howled around them, the temperature dropping well below freezing. Their breath turned to vapor in the air. Alex was waiting by the entrance of a small, makeshift station, his face weathered and worn. His eyes, however, betrayed a sense of urgency. "You made it," he said quickly, ushering them inside. "We don't have much time. The anomaly is growing stronger." Elon nodded, a grim expression on his face. "Where is it?" Alex led them to a large map displayed on the wall, showing a section of the Arctic that had been marked with a series of coordinates. "This is the spot. We've been drilling for days. What we found, I don't know how to explain it." Greg's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "Just come and see," Alex said, leading them down into a narrow hallway. The air felt colder the deeper they went. Soon, they reached a steel door, heavily reinforced. Alex punched in a code, and the door hissed open, revealing a large chamber beyond. What Elon saw inside stopped him in his tracks. In the center of the chamber stood a massive, glowing object, an orb of sorts, suspended in mid-air. It seemed to shimmer with a strange, iridescent light, shifting and changing with every second. Around the orb, strange patterns, similar to the ones he had seen in the architect's facility, were etched into the walls. "This," Alex said, his voice barely a whisper, "is where it all started. This is the heart of the anomaly, and I believe it's linked to the architects." Elon stepped forward, mesmerized by the orb. "What is it?" Alex hesitated. "I think it's some kind of interdimensional portal. It's a device designed to open a rift between realities." Elon's mind raced. Could this be the final piece of the puzzle? Was this where the architects had been trying to manipulate the dimensions from? The sound of something shifting deep within the orb filled the room, and the light within it pulsed, brighter than ever before. Elon and Greg exchanged a look. They had to act fast. This was the source, and if they didn't understand it, they risked the collapse of everything. The orb pulsed in the center of the cold, sterile chamber, its iridescent glow intensifying. The air hummed with a strange energy, a vibrating frequency that Elon could feel deep in his bones. It wasn't just light. It was power, raw and untamed. He could sense that whatever this orb represented, it was far more than anything humanity had ever encountered. The truth of the anomaly lay within it, but unraveling that truth would come at a cost. Alex stepped back, his breath visible in the freezing air. "It's been growing, Elon. The further we get, the more it shifts, like it's alive. It's not just manipulating our world. It's distorting the fabric of time and space itself." Elon nodded, eyes fixed on the swirling energy within the orb. This is what the architects were after. They didn't just want power. They wanted to control the very nature of reality. If they could open rifts between dimensions, if they could manipulate time and space, they could change everything. Greg, standing to Elon's left, stepped forward, his fingers twitching with the need to understand the technology. "I've never seen anything like this. It's like the orb is a bridge between worlds, but it's unstable. It's not meant to be in our reality." Elon's mind raced. He had thought he understood the stakes, had believed that the crisis was about stopping a single dangerous device, a countdown, a global event. But this was beyond his comprehension. The architects had engineered something far more profound. They hadn't just intended to shift the dimensions. They were trying to rewrite them entirely. "We need to shut it down," Elon said firmly. His voice was filled with urgency. If this thing is the key, we can't let it continue. Alex looked at him, his face tight with anxiety. That's easier said than done. The orb, it's part of the reality fabric now. Disrupting it could destabilize everything. Greg nodded, looking up at the glowing sphere. Exactly. The more we interact with it, the more it adapts to us. It's learning. Elon glanced at the screens on the walls, reading the data that flickered across them. The orb wasn't just an object. It was a network, a nexus of energy connecting various dimensions. But the deeper they delved into it, the more complex it became. The data was too much to process, and the more they tried to understand it, the more it shifted, presenting new configurations of possibility. We don't have the luxury of time, Elon muttered. We need a plan. Now. For the next several hours, the trio worked feverishly, poring over the data from the orb, analyzing the shifting patterns that seemed to emanate from it. Elon's mind was a blur of calculations, theories, and strategies, but nothing felt concrete. Every time they made progress, the orb seemed to evolve, slipping further out of their reach. What if we can't shut it down? Greg asked quietly, almost to himself. What if it's beyond us now? What if the architects were right? Elon shot a glance at Greg, his frustration flaring. We're not giving up, he said firmly. If the architects are trying to control reality, we have to stop them. No one should have the power to manipulate time, space, and dimensions at will. Greg paused, looking at the orb and then back at Elon. But what if they were trying to save the world? What if they believed they were doing the right thing? Elon shook his head. Even if they thought they were saving the world, they were playing with forces beyond comprehension. If we don't act now, we'll lose everything. Not just this world, but every world connected by this, every timeline, every reality. As they continued their work, a sudden beeping sound broke through the tension. The orb's glow had intensified once again, and a new set of data had appeared on the monitors. The screens blinked rapidly, showing fluctuating codes, symbols, and numbers. That's new, Alex said, pointing at the screen. Elon stepped forward, his eyes scanning the data. This wasn't just an anomaly. It was a direct message, a signal that had been encoded into the orb. It's like it's communicating with us, he murmured. The orb is trying to tell us something. Greg's voice was filled with disbelief. It's adapting. It's learning from us. Elon's mind snapped into focus. If we can tap into it, understand what it's trying to communicate, maybe we can gain control. The trio gathered around the orb once more, their minds focused on deciphering its complex structure. Elon's thoughts whirred as he adjusted the frequency of the signals, tuning into the vibrations of the orb. It was as if it had become an extension of reality itself, a conduit for the very forces that govern time, space, and existence. And then, something changed. The orb seemed to stabilize for a brief moment, as if it had recognized their presence, as if it was waiting for them to understand. Elon, I think it wants us to connect with it, Greg said slowly. Not just physically, but on a deeper level. It's offering us a way in. Elon frowned. A way in? Greg nodded. It's like a neural interface. The data is transmitting directly to our minds. It's as if it's inviting us to merge with it, to understand its purpose. Elon's pulse quickened. The idea of connecting with the orb, of merging with the forces that had been manipulating reality, was terrifying. But if they didn't try, if they didn't understand it, they would never have the chance to stop it. It could be our only chance, Elon said, his voice low but determined. But we need to be careful. We don't know what will happen if we let it connect to us. With no other choice, Elon, Greg, and Alex each placed a hand on the orb. The moment their skin touched its surface, a powerful surge of energy shot through their bodies. Their vision blurred, and the very air around them seemed to distort. Elon's mind was bombarded with images, flashes of alternate worlds and timelines, places where history had unfolded differently. He saw cities rising from the ashes of war, civilizations evolving in unexpected ways. He saw the rise of the architects, a group of visionaries who had believed that by manipulating reality, they could prevent the collapse of the multiverse. But in their pursuit of control, they had unleashed something far more dangerous. He saw the ripple effect, spreading through dimensions, causing chaos and destruction. He saw the consequences of their actions, worlds colliding, time folding in on itself, entire realities being consumed. But amidst the chaos, there was something else, a flicker of hope, a potential solution. The orb wasn't just a weapon. It was a tool, a way to heal the rift between the worlds, to stabilize the collapse before it was too late. Elon's eyes snapped open. He gasped for air, his body shaking from the overwhelming experience. Greg and Alex looked equally stunned, their faces pale, their minds clearly still reeling from what they had just witnessed. Elon swallowed hard, steadying himself. "We know what we have to do." Greg looked at him, his voice hoarse. "What is it? What did you see?" "We stopped the dimensional bleed at the source," Elon said, his voice resolute. "But to do that, we need to take the orb to its origin point, the place where it all started. If we don't, the rift will continue to grow, and we'll lose everything." Alex nodded grimly. "Where is it?" Elon's gaze hardened. "The source is at the heart of the Arctic, where the architects first opened the gateway. We need to get there before the rift spreads too far." The atmosphere in the Arctic base was thick with tension. The trio had just emerged from their mind-bending experience with the orb, and though they now had a clearer understanding of their mission, the weight of their task pressed heavily on them. They were about to venture into the very heart of the anomaly, where the architects had opened the initial rift between dimensions. If they failed to stop it, the reality they knew, and every reality, would crumble. Elon gathered his thoughts as he stood before the communications console. The base was a remote outpost, buried deep within the frozen expanse. The wind howled outside, rattling the walls as a constant reminder of how isolated they were. The last thing they wanted was to be stuck in the Arctic, cut off from the rest of the world, with no way to stop the impending collapse. "We need to move quickly," Elon said, scanning the maps Alex had provided. "The rift is expanding faster than anticipated. If we don't reach the origin point within the next 48 hours, we won't be able to reverse it." Greg nodded, adjusting his gloves. "Let's get to the extraction point. The sooner we get to the heart of the rift, the better." Alex joined them, his face grim. "I've been tracking the anomaly. It's not just shifting reality anymore. It's starting to pull other timelines into ours. We've already seen glimpses of it, fragments of other worlds bleeding through. If the rift widens any further, we'll be faced with alternate versions of ourselves, alternate histories. It'll be chaos." Elon's eyes narrowed. "We have to stop it before the rift consumes everything. If we fail, there won't be a single reality left untouched." They gathered their equipment and prepared to leave the base. The helicopter that would take them to the heart of the rift was waiting outside, its blades already turning. As they made their way toward the chopper, Elon's mind lingered on the unsettling truth they had uncovered. The architects had opened the gateway not to conquer, but to preserve the multiverse. In their pursuit of balance, they had unwittingly set in motion the unraveling of reality. The journey to the epicenter of the rift was grueling. The Arctic winds whipped around them as the helicopter sped across the frozen wasteland, a silent expanse of snow and ice stretching as far as the eye could see. There were no signs of life, no markers to indicate anything out of the ordinary. The landscape seemed as empty as the future they were trying to save. As they approached the coordinates, however, the atmosphere began to change. The air shimmered, like a heat wave on a summer's day, but colder. It felt wrong. The distortion in the fabric of space and time was palpable. The horizon seemed to waver, as if the world itself was being stretched thin. Elon's gaze fixed on the horizon, where the distortion seemed strongest. "We're getting close." Alex's voice crackled through the headset. "This is it. The epicenter is directly below us. We'll need to land and descend into the crevasse. The rift's origin is deep underground." The helicopter descended slowly, cutting through the disorienting shimmer of the air. They touched down on a plateau of ice, and the crew quickly disembarked, each of them feeling the weight of what was to come. Elon adjusted the strap on his pack and looked around. The landscape before them was unearthly, as if the world itself had been peeled back and replaced by something alien. The sky above them rippled, like a pool of water disturbed by a stone. The air felt thin, charged with electricity, and the ground beneath their feet vibrated faintly. "This place," Greg said, his voice hushed. "It's like the fabric of reality is unraveling." "We have to keep moving," Elon replied, his voice steady. "We need to reach the heart of the rift before it spreads too far." The journey down was more perilous than they had anticipated. The crevasse they descended into seemed endless, a deep chasm that plunged into the earth. The deeper they went, the more the air shifted, the more the fabric of space twisted. The walls around them were etched with strange symbols, glyphs that matched the patterns they had seen in the orb. As they reached the bottom, a sense of foreboding settled over them. The source of the rift was near, and Elon could feel it in his chest. The closer they got, the more distorted the world around them became. Time itself seemed to bend, flickering in and out of sync. At the heart of the chasm, they found it, a massive chamber, the size of a stadium, glowing with unnatural light. In the center stood a vast, complex structure, a crystalline formation that pulsed with energy. It was the source of the rift, the very epicenter where the architects had made their first attempt to open a gateway between dimensions. The structure shimmered with an eerie, otherworldly glow, its edges sharp and angular. It seemed to hum with power, like a living entity. The air around it crackled with energy, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. "This is it," Elon said, his voice steady but filled with awe. "This is where it all began." Alex stepped forward, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and wonder. "It's incredible, but we're running out of time. The rift is getting worse." Elon surveyed the structure, his mind racing. The data they had gathered, the images they had seen from the orb, were all pointing to one thing. The rift was alive. It wasn't just a tear in the fabric of reality. It was a growing organism, feeding off the energy of the multiverse, drawing in new worlds, new timelines. If they didn't stop it, it would consume everything. "We need to destroy it," Elon said, his voice sharp. "This structure, whatever it is, whatever it was meant to be, must be destroyed. It's the root of the rift." Greg looked hesitant. "But if we destroy it, what happens to the multiverse? What happens to us?" Elon paused, his eyes scanning the structure. He could feel the weight of the decision hanging in the air, but he knew there was no other choice. The rift had to be sealed before it could spread further. "We don't have a choice," he said finally. "We stop this now, or the multiverse collapses. All of reality collapses. We have to destroy it." As they approached the structure, the energy within it flared, as if it were aware of their presence. The ground beneath them shook, and the air grew thick with the hum of power. Elon could feel the rift pulling at him, tugging at his very being, trying to pull him into another reality. He shook off the sensation, focusing on the task at hand. They worked quickly, placing explosives at the base of the crystalline structure. The countdown to detonation began, and as the timer ticked down, the structure pulsed with an overwhelming energy, brighter and more intense than ever. "Get back!" Elon shouted as the final seconds ticked away. They retreated to a safe distance, watching as the structure's glow intensified. The explosion, when it came, was deafening. The ground shook, and the air was filled with the sound of tearing metal and crashing energy. For a moment, everything went still. The rift seemed to falter, its pull weakening. But then, just as quickly as it had started, the energy surged once more violent than before. Elon's heart pounded. It wasn't over. The blast reverberated through the chamber, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. The once glowing crystalline structure exploded in a blaze of white-hot energy, sending shockwaves through the air. For a moment, Elon and his team were blinded by the light, their ears ringing from the deafening explosion. The intense energy felt like a wave, crashing against their bodies, forcing them to their knees. And then, as quickly as it had come, the blinding light faded. The chamber went silent. The hum of the rift, the oppressive pull they had felt moments before, seemed to quieten. Elon rose to his feet, wiping the debris from his face, his heart pounding in his chest. He glanced around, trying to process what had just happened. The structure was gone, but the air still felt charged, too charged. The rift hadn't closed. If anything, it had grown more intense. Did it work? Greg asked, his voice hoarse, as he shakily stood up. Elon's gaze remained fixed on the center of the chamber, where the structure had once stood. The floor was scorched, and the air shimmered unnaturally. It wasn't supposed to be like this. They had destroyed the source, the epicenter of the rift. But the energy didn't dissipate. It surged. No, Elon muttered under his breath, his mind racing. It didn't work. It's adapting. The rift's not just powered by the structure. It's integrated into the fabric of reality itself. Alex's voice, panicked, cut through Elon's thoughts. What do you mean? What the hell is happening, Elon? Elon turned toward his team, his eyes wide with realization. The rift isn't just an anomaly. It's a new dimension, a force that exists beyond space and time. We've been treating it like something that can be destroyed, but it can't be. It is. The air around them seemed to pulse as if the rift was listening, growing more sentient with each passing moment. Elon's stomach twisted with fear and realization. They had underestimated the rift, thinking it was something that could be severed with a simple explosion. But they were wrong. It was not merely a tear. It was an evolving consciousness, something alive and expanding. A sound interrupted the silence. A low, eerie hum reverberated through the chamber, shaking the walls. The ground beneath their feet started to tremble again, more violently than before. Elon, this isn't good, Greg said, his voice shaking as the tremors intensified. We need to get out of here. If the rift is growing, we won't make it. Alex scanned the data on his handheld device. The rift's energy is exponentially increasing. The more we interact with it, the stronger it becomes. The fabric of reality is collapsing faster now. I don't think we can stop it. Elon clenched his fists, the weight of their situation pressing down on him. He had thought he understood the stakes, had thought they could destroy the heart of the rift and close the anomaly for good. But this was something beyond their comprehension. The rift wasn't just an enemy. It was a force that existed outside the very laws they had known. We have to try something else, Elon said, determination settling over him like a heavy cloak. There's another way. We can't destroy it, but we can contain it. Greg looked at him with disbelief. Contain it? How? The whole structure just exploded, and nothing happened. Elon didn't reply immediately. His mind was racing as he scanned their surroundings. Then, his eyes landed on something. Something that had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. A faint, glowing line snaking its way across the chamber floor. The orb, Elon said, his voice rising. It was more than just a key to understanding the rift. It's the anchor. It connects all the worlds. We need to use it, connect with it. But we destroyed the orb, Alex said, frowning. No, Elon corrected. The orb was never fully destroyed. We need to use the remnants, the energy it left behind. If we can tap into it, we might be able to reverse the damage. Greg and Alex exchanged uncertain glances, but they both knew there was no other option. They had to try. As they gathered near the glowing line on the floor, Elon focused all of his thoughts on the remnants of the orb. The energy was still there, pulsing softly beneath the surface of reality. He could feel it. It was the same energy that had fueled the rift. It was both part of and apart from the world they knew. He stretched out his hand and let his fingers graze the glowing line. The moment he did, the energy surged into him, filling his mind with a vision, an image of countless timelines, stretching and folding upon one another like pages in a book. But now, something had changed. The timelines were merging, colliding, each one threatening to consume the others. And in the center of it all stood the rift, a great and terrible void. The orb had shown them the way forward, the only way forward. They had to connect the rift to the central source of the multiverse, the point where all timelines converged. Only there could the energy be contained. Elon. Alex's voice broke through his trance. What's happening? What do you see? Elon pulled his hand back from the energy line, his face pale and sweaty. I know what we have to do, but it's dangerous. If we're going to contain the rift, we have to connect it to the heart of the multiverse itself. Greg's eyes widened. What does that mean? We're talking about the core of everything, every timeline, every dimension. You're saying we need to link the rift directly to it? Elon nodded slowly. It's the only way to stabilize it. The rift can't be destroyed, but if we give it an anchor, it'll stop spreading. We'll contain it, like a pressure valve. Alex looked horrified. And how do we do that? How do we connect the rift to the core of all existence? Elon took a deep breath. We need to tap into the energy of the orb, what's left of it, and create a link to the heart of the multiverse. The rift is an offshoot, a disturbance that has grown out of control. By connecting it to its true source, we'll force it to stabilize. Greg shook his head. That sounds impossible. It's beyond anything we can even imagine. It's our only chance, Elon said, the weight of the words pressing down on him. They moved to the center of the chamber, where the remnants of the orb's energy flickered weakly. Elon stretched his hands toward the energy, focusing all his thoughts on the task at hand. The air crackled with power as he attempted to tap into the energy. He could feel the rift's pull, the force of its insatiable hunger for more worlds. Elon, don't! Alex shouted, but it was too late. Elon's body was flooded with a blinding surge of energy. His vision exploded with flashes of light, and his mind was transported beyond the confines of the chamber, into the heart of the multiverse itself. He could see it now, the infinite web of dimensions, timelines, and possibilities. He was connected to it, drawn into its core. But it wasn't enough. The rift's hunger for power was too great. The energy was too volatile. He could feel the rift fighting back, twisting and warping reality itself. Hold on, Greg shouted, grabbing Elon's arm and trying to pull him back. But the force was too great. For a moment, everything seemed to shatter. Reality, time, space. The rift roared louder than ever, a cacophony of destruction and chaos. But then, in the center of it all, Elon felt a calmness, a clarity. He knew what needed to be done. With a final push, he forged the connection. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Elon's body was still shaking from the overwhelming surge of energy that had coursed through him. His vision blurred, the edges of reality wavered, and for a moment, it felt as if time itself had frozen. He wasn't sure where his body ended and the multiverse began. Everything, the rift, the timelines, the dimensions, felt as if it were merging into one chaotic whirlpool, threatening to consume him whole. His breath came in short, shallow gasps. He could feel the rift's pull, its unrelenting hunger for more, tearing at the fabric of everything they knew. The energy was so intense it felt like his very soul was being stretched thin. But then, through the chaos, he heard a voice, a familiar voice, a tether that grounded him. Elon, focus. Alex's voice broke through the noise, clear and sharp. You have to hold on. With a Herculean effort, Elon forced his mind back into his body. The rift was still there, growing larger by the second. But there was something else, too. In the heart of the multiverse, there was a pulsing energy, steady, unwavering, and calm. It was the core, the source of all things, the anchor for every timeline and every dimension. He didn't understand it fully, but he knew what had to be done. The energy from the orb had opened the door, but it was up to him to walk through it. Elon, Greg shouted, his voice urgent. You need to release the connection. If you can't hold it. But Elon didn't hear him. He was already too far gone, tethered to the multiverse itself, feeling the pulse of infinite worlds reverberating in his veins. The rift was still growing, but Elon now understood the true nature of the anomaly. It wasn't just an explosion of energy, it was a living force. A force that had once been part of the multiverse but had grown out of balance. The architects had opened the gateway between dimensions not to conquer, but to ensure balance, to preserve the existence of all worlds. But in their attempt, they had inadvertently caused the very unraveling they sought to prevent. The multiverse was not just a place of infinite worlds. It was a living, breathing entity with its own laws, its own flow of time and space. And the rift? It was a crack in that flow, an interruption that threatened to destroy everything. Elon, listen to me. Alex's voice broke through again, this time with an edge of desperation. The rift, it's not just a tear. It's an imbalance in the very core of everything. You have to anchor it. He could feel it now, the pulse at the center of the rift. He had to become that anchor, to tie the rift to its origin and force it back into equilibrium. With his mind and body now fully intertwined with the pulse of the multiverse, Elon reached out, focusing all his energy on that core. He could feel the force of every timeline, every world, every possibility swirling around him. But in the center, there was a singular, constant hum, a pulse of pure energy. "Let go," he whispered to himself, his mind clearing. "Let go and let it flow." And then, with a final exhale, Elon let go. He allowed the energy to flow through him, not as a force to control, but as something to be guided. The rift was not an enemy. It was a manifestation of imbalance, and with every world he connected with, he could feel it starting to calm. The energy flowed from him and into the rift, spreading like a network of tendrils, pulling the rift back into its rightful place. Outside the chamber, the ground was shaking violently. The sky above them had darkened, a swirling storm of energy hanging like a storm cloud. As Elon connected to the core, the rift's presence seemed to waver, the pull lessening. Alex and Greg could only watch in awe as the chamber around them began to change. The air shimmered as the dimensions that had been bleeding into each other began to pull back into their respective realities. Fragments of distant worlds, timelines that had collided with theirs, began to fade, flickering back into the fabric of their own dimension. "Elon," Greg called, but it was unclear if he could hear him. The energy in the chamber was so thick that even their voices seemed muffled, as if swallowed by the rift itself. For what felt like an eternity, Elon remained locked in the center of the pulse, his mind lost in the process. Time seemed to bend, stretch, and collapse. The rift pulsed, weakening, the chaos of infinite worlds retreating. Slowly, agonizingly, the worlds that had bled through began to retreat. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the rift began to shrink, folding back into itself. The pulse in Elon's mind calmed, and the energy around them began to dissipate. It was over. Elon opened his eyes. His body ached, every muscle screaming from the exertion. He was trembling, his hands still tingling with the remnants of the energy he had channeled. The chamber around him was silent now, the oppressive hum of the rift gone. The air felt still, calm, and normal. He looked up at Alex and Greg, both of them standing at the edge of the chamber, staring at him with wide eyes. "You did it," Alex said, his voice full of awe. Elon could barely find the words to respond. He was still processing the enormity of what had just happened, the sheer scope of what he had done. He had connected the rift to the heart of the multiverse, contained it, but he knew deep down that what they had accomplished was only a temporary solution. The rift, the imbalance, might return one day, but for now, they had stopped it. For now, the multiverse was safe. "It's not over," Elon finally said, his voice steady but weary. "The multiverse is still fragile. We may have contained it, but we need to be ready if it comes back." Greg nodded, his eyes still wide with disbelief. "We'll be ready." Alex stepped forward, offering Elon a hand. "You've saved us. All of us. All the worlds." Elon took the hand, pulling himself to his feet. "I didn't do it alone. We did it together." For a moment, there was silence, an unspoken understanding. They had faced an impossible challenge and come out victorious. They had saved the multiverse, but the future was uncertain. The rift might return, but they were no longer helpless. They had learned the truth about the multiverse and the dangers that lay beyond it. As they made their way out of the chamber, Elon looked up at the sky. The storm clouds gone, replaced by a serene, clear sky. The weight of their victory was heavy, but there was also a sense of peace. For now, the multiverse was safe. But the real journey was just beginning. The calm after the storm was almost surreal. The weight of the past weeks, of everything they had fought for, everything they had risked, seemed to lift, but it wasn't gone. It lingered, like a shadow that could never fully be dispelled. Elon stood at the edge of the chamber, his hand resting against the cold stone wall. He stared out into the distance, where the sky stretched wide and open. The world felt different now, almost too quiet, too peaceful. But he knew that peace was temporary. They had stopped the rift, for now. But the knowledge of what they had seen, what they had faced, hung in the air like an unresolved chord. The multiverse wasn't a simple thing. It wasn't just something they could control or even fully understand. It was a living, breathing entity with its own rhythms and laws, and all they had done was hold it together, barely. Elon, Alex called, walking up to him. You okay? Elon didn't answer immediately. He was still processing everything. The destruction, the chaos, the unimaginable force of the rift, and the fact that he had somehow become a part of it. He had connected with the heart of the multiverse, felt its pulse, its flow. He couldn't explain what that had been like, how it felt to be both inside and outside of everything. But one thing was clear. They hadn't won. Not really. They had merely delayed the inevitable. I'm fine, Elon said finally, his voice low. But I don't think we've seen the last of it. Alex frowned, clearly confused. What do you mean? We contained it, Elon. It's over. Elon turned to face him, his expression hardening. No, it's not over. We've only scratched the surface. The rift might be contained now, but the multiverse, it's unstable. It's still fragile. And we have no idea what else might be out there. Greg approached, his face still pale from the intensity of the battle they had just fought. Are you saying there's more to this? More rifts? More worlds? Elon nodded. Yes, and we need to be prepared. The rift we just closed wasn't the only one. It was just the first. There are countless others, dimensions we can't even begin to fathom. We've seen a small glimpse, but the truth is, we don't know the full scope of what we're dealing with. Greg and Alex exchanged uneasy glances, but there was something else in their eyes now, something they hadn't had before. A resolve. They had come so close to losing everything, but now they understood. They understood the stakes. We're not done, Elon said, his voice steady, determined. This was just the beginning. There's so much more we need to learn, so much more we need to prepare for. Alex sighed, shaking his head. I don't even know where to start. This is beyond anything we ever imagined. What do we even do next? Elon paused for a moment, considering. We keep going. We build the tools we need, we gather knowledge, and we stay ahead of it. We have to. If we don't, the rifts could tear everything apart. Greg crossed his arms, looking out into the horizon. It sounds like we're on the brink of something much bigger than any of us. Something we can't control. We may not be able to control it, Elon said, his voice quiet but resolute. But we can prepare, and we can fight. Together. In the days that followed, life returned to a semblance of normalcy. The team returned to their research, but now with a newfound sense of urgency. They had discovered a fraction of what lay beyond the known universe, and it was enough to shake them to their core. But they also knew they weren't alone anymore. The connection they had shared in that moment, the link to the multiverse, had bonded them in ways that were impossible to explain. They weren't just a team of scientists and engineers anymore. They were the protectors of something far bigger than themselves. And with that responsibility came a weight they could never escape. Elon spent hours in the lab, studying the remnants of the rift, trying to glean any knowledge from the disaster they had narrowly avoided. There were no answers. Not yet. But he could feel it in his bones. The same feeling he had when he first stood in the room with the rift. The same pull. The same hunger. It was waiting. In the back of his mind, he kept hearing a whisper, a soft murmur in the darkness of his thoughts. The rift never truly closes. It only hides. And as the days stretched into weeks, Elon began to realize something else. Something that filled him with a mix of fear and anticipation. The rift wasn't just a threat. It was a doorway. A doorway to something far greater, something far more dangerous than they could ever comprehend. But that didn't matter now. They would face it. Whatever came next, whatever threat loomed on the horizon, they would face it head-on. Because that's what they had been chosen to do. And for the first time in a long time, Elon felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, Elon stood outside, looking out over the world. The chaos, the destruction, the unimaginable force they had just faced. It all seemed so far away now. but he knew it wasn't gone. He could feel it, like an echo in the back of his mind, like a soft ripple in the air. The rift hadn't been defeated. It had merely been delayed. What will Elon and his team do now? Will they be able to stop the rifts once and for all, or are they just waiting for the next wave? The future of the multiverse is uncertain, but one thing is clear. Their journey has only just begun. Share your thoughts and predictions in the comments below, and stay tuned for more as the story continues.